Meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our Daly City Council meeting, our regular meeting for this evening. It is October 14th. For those are willing to participate in public participation, there are 3 ways to submit public comments. 1, submit written comments by the meeting day. 2, submit written comments during the meeting. And 3, attend the meeting in person. 1, to submit written comments by meeting day, please email cityclerk@dalycity.org and include public comment in the subject line. All written comments received by 4 p.m. on the meeting day will be provided to the City Council prior to the meeting. Please note, any emailed comments received after 4 p.m. on the meeting date are not guaranteed to be received by the City Council prior to the meeting. Comments are not read aloud into the record. 2, during the meeting, you may visit www.dalycity.org/agendas to submit comments using the public comment form to address the City Council on any specific item or during the public comment period. And such comments are delivered to the City Council and City staff during the meeting and may be read into the record at the time they are received. 3, to speak at the meeting in person, please complete a speaker card located at the entrance to the council member chamber and submit to a staff member as early in the meeting as possible. Thank you very much. May we all rise for a pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam City Clerk, may I have roll call, please?
Ms. DiGiovanni.
Present.
Dr. Rod.
Present.
Ms. Peranya.
Present.
Mr. Sylvester.
Glenn Sylvester, present.
Ms. Manalo.
Present. Thank you very much. Moving on to our presentations. Our first presentation today is a proclamation on Indigenous Peoples Day on October 14, 2024. Whereas Indigenous Peoples Day is observed on the second Monday of October to honor the rich histories, diverse cultures, and important contributions of the Indigenous peoples throughout the world. And whereas the City of Daly City acknowledges the Indigenous peoples were the original stewards of the lands we now call home, including the Ramaytush Ohlone, who have lived in the San Francisco Peninsula for thousands of years. And whereas the City of Daly City recognizes the historic and ongoing struggles that the Indigenous peoples have faced, including colonization, displacement, and marginalization, while acknowledging the resilience and strength of these communities in preserving their cultures, languages, and traditions. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day is an opportunity for the City of Daly City to reflect on its own relationship with Indigenous communities, to educate the public about the enduring presence and the significance of the Indigenous peoples, and to honor the deep connection they maintain to land, water, and natural world. And whereas Daly City recognizes the importance of acknowledging the contributions of all ethnic groups to the enrichment of our culturals and historical heritage of our city, whereas the City of Daly City values the contributions of Indigenous peoples to continue to make the cultural, social, environmental, and economic fabric of our city, state, and nation, recognizing that Indigenous knowledge and practices are vital to addressing global challenges like climate change and sustainability. And now, therefore, I, Jocelyn C. Manalo, Mayor and members of the City Council and the City of Daly City, do hereby proclaim October 14 as Indigenous Peoples Day in Daly City, and encourage all residents to reflect on the histories of Indigenous peoples, engage with their communities, and support efforts toward healing and equity. Before I go on to our next proclamation, and this is for the record, Madam City Clerk, I'd like to ask our city manager to look at ways we can honor the Indigenous community, not only on October 14, but at our every meeting for city council. And there have been other jurisdictions that do land acknowledgements and land recognition. And I think that is something that is long overdue for our council. And I'd for us to look into that and do some research because I think it's not only on this day, but I think we should honor as part of the ritual we do here in our city of Daly City. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I second that as well. If we could look at different practices that I know Skyline College, when we do any type of beginning day activities, we start off with a land acknowledgement. I really think that's a great step in the right direction. I think this is important in terms of looking at Indigenous Peoples' Days because of like how history is important. And a lot of times entry point to the history is really, really important because a lot of times we begin at colonization, and then when we begin at colonization, we see the people that are oppressed as just oppressed. And we ignore like thousands of years of what they have contributed, what have they created in this land. Because when we think about the streets, the freeways, water, a lot of these things were created by indigenous peoples. We just didn't know about it because we never learned about it. So things like El Camino Real, things like Junipero Serra, those things need to be seen as decolonized ways of looking at things. And when we look at technology, sometimes we got to look back because things like what we enjoy today are structures that were created years ago before colonization. So I'm in step with the mayor. We need to go from like ways of going from just simple land acknowledgements to forms of action. And thank you, Mayor, for acknowledging this day.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor. In that respect, I appreciate your comments on this. I know that one important aspect is also working with the communities, the Native communities, on our land acknowledgement. And so, City Manager Piccolotti, I will send you some contacts in which some members in our community who we could work with in this regard as well. Thank you. Council member.
Thank you. So with Rod, when he was talking about, and then there used to be in Hillside Park by San Bruno Mountain, Del Shambari, and you can get in touch with him. He was telling me that they used to have a celebration and concert with the San Bruno Mountain Park, because a lot of that is the shell mound over in that area. So he called me today and said that those people, he actually has the contact information, that he'll be happy. I believe he's been in contact with you before, Mr. Piccolotti. He has the contact information of the people that they used to do that with, and he'd be happy to work with you on doing something at it was at Hillside Park, because that's where the show mound is. Thank you.
Any other
they used to have a
comments
drum.
from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Moving on to our next proclamation. It is Vascular Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, VEDS, Action Month for October 2024. Whereas vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, VEDS, is a life-threatening, lifelong genetic, aortic, and vascular condition, and whereas nearly 80% of individuals with VEDS experience vascular complications, including potentially fatal aortic dissection by the age of 40, and whereas it is estimated that 1 in 50,000 individuals, or 6,000 to 8,000 people in the United States, are born with VEDS. And whereas awareness and early diagnosis is key to medical monitoring that allows individuals to experience the best possible outcomes while living with VEDS. And whereas it is critically important for first responders, emergency department personnel, and all healthcare providers to be aware of both the signs of VEDS and the symptoms of aortic dissection in VEDS patients, recognizing VEDS as an acute medical emergency that requires immediate CT scan and potential surgical intervention to save lives. And whereas through public awareness, the City of Daly City seeks to raise awareness of VEDS in order to properly diagnose and treat individuals affected by this condition. And whereas everyone can learn the signs and symptoms by visiting the VEDS, that's the V as in victory, EDS movement.org website. Now, therefore, I, Jocelyn C. Manal, Mayor, and the members of the City Council do hereby proclaim month of October as 2024 VEDS Action Month in Daly City and commends the VEDS community, the VEDS movement for its commitments to individuals living with VEDS and related conditions and their families, and extend best wishes for a successful month of increasing awareness and saving lives. I'd like to call up Catherine Mills, our library assistant, to please come up.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and esteemed council members, for recognizing VEDS Action Month. On the surface, I know I look perfectly healthy. You would never know I have 6 tears throughout the arteries that deliver blood to all of my vital organs. This happens because essentially my body doesn't correctly produce the glue that holds everything together, causing spontaneous tears. Upon first learning about vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I was terrified. It quite literally affects everything in my body. And because it's so rare that many, even in the medical community, have never heard of it, I hadn't, it can be life-threatening, and there's no cure. But with a diagnosis and proper management and screening, I can live a mostly normal life. Raising awareness is vital to saving lives. It took 16 years from my first event to finally receiving a diagnosis last year, and luckily I'd been careful and took care of my health throughout all of that time. Knowing that VEDS helps make me better. Knowing I have VEDS helps me make better decisions about my medical care, and the earlier someone can be diagnosed, the better. That's why I'm here today, and I'm so grateful for your acknowledgement of VEDS Action Month. I encourage anyone who wants to learn more to visit thevedsmovement.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing us to our attention and reaching out. The best way is education, and you've educated me about VEDS, and as the City of Daly City, we will educate others about VEDS.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Awareness.
We're moving on to our third proclamation, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For October 2024, and I do have a statement from Cora as well, and then and recipient, we have Lizelle here as well to receive the proclamation. For October 2024, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, whereas more than 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men and 1 in 2 transgender individuals experience some form of physical or sexual violence and or stalking by their intimate partner in their lifetime. And whereas the marginalization of certain groups in society, including undocumented individuals, transgender individuals, and people living with disabilities, increases their vulnerability to domestic violence. And whereas there were 8,275 requests for service through Cora Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse with their 24-hour crisis hotline, and law enforcement referrals last year, and 2,378 adults and teens received community education on healthy relationships and the impact of intimate partner abuse. Whereas in San Mateo County, 94 adults and children were provided emergency shelter, and 76 households were provided longer-term rental assistance to escape their abusers last year. Whereas 485 adults and children received therapy to help them with domestic violence-related trauma, and Cora fielded 1,925 requests for legal assistance. And whereas Daly City, as part of San Mateo County, recognizes the critical need for county-wide services in order to support our residents. Whereas intimate partner violence continues to be among the most underreported crimes, and Daly City is committed to eliminating all forms of intimate partner abuse. And whereas on October 10, 2023, the City of Daly City partnered with Cora on the county-wide Speak Up program to provide training to local businesses that would help them to recognize and respond to employees and customers who are impacted by domestic violence. And whereas Speak Up launched in Daly City between July 2024 and August 2024 and reached out to 332 businesses and conducted 61 presentations. And whereas Daly City is committed to cultivating resilience, understanding, and solidarity against domestic violence. Now, therefore, I, Jocelyn C. Manalo, Mayor and members of the City Council, hereby proclaim October 2024 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Daly City, and encourage the Daly City community to stand together against domestic violence, to offer support and understanding to survivors, and do their part to help get rid of intimate partner violence. I will read a statement from Cora for Domestic Violence Awareness since they are unable to make it today. Karen Ferguson and Lynn Schuett from the nonprofit Cora, Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse, extend their sincerest apologies for not being able to make tonight's meeting. Cora appreciates Daly City's observance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month and the city's ongoing support on such an important cause. Cora also extends their gratitude to the city for partnering on Speak Up program, and they look forward to continuing our partnership to create meaningful change in the community. Vice Mayor.
Yes. Ate, thank you for being in, coming here and accepting the proclamation. I'm glad that Florence is back in my class. But I think this is like a very, very important proclamation because when we learn about like intimate partner violence, really it's about power dynamics in a relationship, and one who has power and other person that doesn't have power. And it's pretty wild because in class today we were talking about issues of like power in relationships, and for some young men that we were talking about in class today, we were talking about men have to grow up to be strong. They have to be the overpowering one, the breadwinner, and these type of stereotypes become normalized in our society to the point it gets acted out, and sometimes become violent. And so I'm glad that we are able to acknowledge this domestic violence proclamation, because we got to see things that are taboo in society and make it to a point where we can actually talk about these relationships. And these relationships start when people are young. Talk about, what does a healthy relationship look like? How do people want to be treated? How do we humanize people in relationships? And I remember we were in a council meeting back on Zoom, and I think it was Rudy Corpus from UP, United Players. He was saying, like, I said a comment saying, like, when people are victims of trauma, like, hurt people hurt people. And then Rudy came up and he's like, hey, you know what though, young brother? But you got to also remember that healed people heal people as well. And that's the hope. The hope is that we can put this proclamation. We start talking to people at a younger age of how to deal with intimate partner relationships, and, like, how do we treat people the way you want to be treated.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for that. I definitely agree with you in that respect. And we're still going to work on that program that we talked about in regards to building something for young people in honor of your daughter, Frances. But that we know that, as you mentioned, it is about healthy relationships and being able to have those conversations at an earlier age in the formative years of junior high, or earlier on, to have, like you said, not to be very open about it and to build at a very young age. And I think that's something that we're looking towards building around really some culturally competent services to be able to also really build that at a young age. And you just talked about, in your classroom, the dynamics of what society has put on as what is a very kind of masculine role or whatnot. But I think it's really being able to provide that space early on. And I appreciate you saying healing, because we know that is part of the continuous process. And as a community, we're here together to uplift and also just hand in hand be with one another, knowing that we have to stand in unison with one another. And so I think it's a project and program that we're still looking to develop, but have identified some funding for. But it's pilot program is an exception, could be maybe a summer program or whatnot. But we know that, as you mentioned, it's at the young age, Vice Mayor. So thank you. Councilmember Perano.
First of all, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here. And, it's the survivors that, thankfully, someone like you who says, I'm going to try to make a difference and hopefully change someone's thought process or what they've learned through their lives. It was something I'd read not that long ago. Is to teach our little girls that when they're little, if a little boy pushes them and then they say, oh, it's because he likes you. And we're supposed to not say that. It's the little things to be able to teach our children and the youth that there are boundaries and that people are their own person. And when they're in a relationship, nobody owns anybody. So they have to learn those skills. And organizations like Alice, like Cora, they're out there. And people are willing to teach and willing to help. And I agree that it needs to be simply, even in preschool and kindergarten, just there's right and then there's wrong. It doesn't mean that the children are right or wrong. We just need to educate them. And there's different levels of education for depending on the age. And so I think it's wonderful that up and into college that they're talking about it. And the more we talk about it and the more we educate people, children, youth, we hope one day that it's a norm. It's a norm in our community and in the world. So thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me speak. And thank you to everyone that make a difference.
Thank you, Councilmember Rano.
Thank you.
Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, without having to say too many words, right? Mercy and I talk every day, so I want to say that our Daly City Youth Health Center, actually, they do a really good job, and they could use maybe some funding towards a lot of that as well. I do know that they connect with Cora, and it also begins it's a hard thing for a parent when they don't know what's going on with their child or whatever, and they start young, but also having the recognition for the parents who are trying to help their child who thinks they're in love or whatever. It's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing. They think it's their first love or whatever. And like he was saying, what is a good relationship? What is a healthy relationship? And sometimes even then, as teenagers, they still don't want to absorb that. So I would say that if we have an expansion, and I think they already work with Cora, I know our wonderful police officers, when they encounter certain situations, they provide services right away, because they do have exemplary training with some of these cases or some of these unfortunate circumstances. And given the opportunity they do have at the victim services, they do have at our county counseling for parents or for victims, but always needs to be more awareness, right? And I know that you're being the face of the awareness with her memory as a blessing. So that takes a lot of courage, but it also gives the purpose that you can get up in the morning with her strength and do it for her and all the other ones, anyone that's out there, so that they know too that there is places to go and that they can seek help. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember.
I want to make mention, I cannot fathom, I just can't, if losing a child, especially before me. And just seeing you here today, the family, shows me the resiliency and the strength to continue to move forward. Domestic violence awareness is very, very important, and it's critical. And leading to what Councilmember DiGiovanni alluded to, which I'm about to allude to, I remember in the earlier days, about 30 years ago, there was something called, the police officers are standing there in the back, I'm going to say the word, dispute mediation. And those days are gone. And the reason why those days are gone, because of the differences and the awareness of domestic violence. Vice Mayor made mention there's a learning curve here that we need to begin early. And part of that learning curve is to understanding the wheel of violence and the different aspects of the wheel, whether you're the breadwinner, whether you just came into this country, and whether the victims could be afraid because of prosecution, but what they need to know, domestic violence will not be tolerated. Every person in the United States enjoys the same rights, whether you are a citizen or not. Every person here in the United States. I have to commend our police officers. I used to be one myself, because you also have to take into account cultural differences. Some countries allow the abuse of their partner. But again, if you're here in the United States, it will not be tolerated. And continued awareness will bring about the implementation of additional resources and reporting. For instance, we have something called mandated reporting, where if there's any inkling of a possibility that it may be a domestic violence relationship, whether it's assault, whether it's battery, it is up to the medical professionals to report it, even if you don't want it to be reported. But they are obligated to report it. So if we continue this awareness in all aspects of abuse, I think it would make for a better informed city and nation and all of its people within. We must love each other. You cannot legislate love. You can't say, I, because of legislation, have to love you. No, it doesn't work that way. It comes from within and having a good heart. So again, thank you. Thank you for the constant awareness of domestic violence, and let's continue to move forward and keep providing that awareness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Proclamation number 4. National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, October 2024. Whereas October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, an annual campaign dedicated to raising awareness about the impact of breast cancer in women and men and honoring those who have lost their lives to this terrible disease. Whereas breast cancer remains the second most common cancer affecting women, and it is estimated that 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer over the course of their lifetime. As of October 2024, an estimated 310,720 women in the United States have been diagnosed with invasive breast cancer, along with approximately 2,800 men. And whereas early detection continues to be one of the most critical strategies for treating breast cancer successfully, with regular screenings being the most reliable way to detect it early before it becomes more difficult to treat. Whereas the City of Daly City commends the tireless efforts of breast cancer advocates, medical professionals, researchers, and caregivers who work daily to advance progress toward a cure, provide critical support, and improve patient care. And whereas we stand in solidarity with breast cancer survivors and their families, celebrating their strength and resilience as they navigate the challenges of this disease. And whereas the pink ribbon has become the universal symbol of breast cancer, illustrating the cause, raising awareness, and bringing together women in solidarity. By wearing a simple piece of the ribbon affixed with a pin, we can show our support for breast cancer awareness. Now, therefore, I, Jocelyn C. Manalo, Mayor and members of the City Council of the City of Daly City, hereby proclaim October 2024 as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in Daly City and urge all citizens to rise to the occasion of becoming involved with breast cancer awareness by learning the warning signs and what steps to take in order to prevent fatalities related to breast cancer. I just want to say for those survivors of breast cancer that are watching, your resilience is there. And I know that with technology and medicine, there has been more survival rates in regards to breast cancer, but we need to continue to remind others to just make sure they have their checkup and also ask for more screenings if needed. Because, as mentioned, 1 in 8 is pretty much still a high statistic. I know that we've had many in our lives that have had breast cancer, and that breast cancer has touched many of our families. My mother is a breast cancer survivor, and so I know the how the hardship of being diagnosed with that and fighting that. And I know that even in the age I am now, I try to remind my friends, my sorority sisters, just a friendly like, hey, did you miss it? Did you go? Because it's very easy in our daily lives to literally say, oh, I missed my appointment, I'm not gonna go. But these are really the precautionary measures for us to do so. And so I wore pink today for National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and also purple for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, to stand in solidarity in October. So, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just like you, and many people that are here and watching, I empathize with a lot of the families that have gone through it. I would say I would recognize her as my second mom, Mantia Dor Adoracion Magbual. She was probably the first person that I knew that passed away from breast cancer, and then see the deterioration happen in such a quick time. And at a young age, it was probably one of the hardest grieving processes I've ever experienced, knowing that I saw this person that raised me, that fed me, that cared and loved for me, passed away in such a quick manner. And she wasn't able to be the grandma that she wanted to become because she wasn't present physically. And I've had a few other aunties that are cancer survivors as well. And I think what was key for them was the early detection and going to their regular checkups. And I'm just glad that they were able to learn from my auntie's experience and struggles, that it was a wake-up call for them. And, as a person, as a partner, I always try to encourage me, even though my wife is on top of it, we always talk about getting these regular checkups, and our friends as well, just because, I'm not young anymore. I was always be like the youth this and youth that, and now I'm not a youth anymore. Now it's just a reality that we need to do these small things so that we can live a longer and have a better quality life.
Thank you. Council member.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to say that for people that come from other places and you always hear their relatives, whether it's in the Philippines or not, we are blessed that we have access to healthcare here. More so, and so people out there, doesn't matter what your status is, you have access to have a mammogram. You have access through the health plan in San Mateo or Medi-Cal, doesn't matter which thing. So you have access. And if you need help or need to go there, you call them and our county health plan in San Mateo or whatever. So don't miss your mammograms. And I also thought that if we could give our opportunity, I think our chief, if they're still selling our patches, if through the chair, if we would allow our chief to come up and talk about the patches that we're having, that are annual patches that they sell, and the money goes to organization for breast cancer.
Acting Chief, would you like to come up? I will say I did notice Bonnie wearing it at our open house, and so I did acknowledge her in wearing the patch and educating others. If you can please share about the patch to those that are watching and those in the audience.
Sure. The police department looks to support breast cancer awareness, recognizing that not only does it impact friends, family, loved ones, but also those coworkers we've experienced in the police department ourselves. So anything that we can do to help support that endeavor is great. Every month, for the month of October, we allow police officers to wear the pink patch on their uniform. We do also sell the patches for $10 a patch to anybody in the community that can either come to the front desk, they can send in a letter, we'll mail it to them, many different ways, and all the proceeds go to the Susan G. Komen Foundation for breast cancer awareness and research.
Thank you so much for doing the work that you do in the community and supporting the foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Prano.
It'll be real quick. As you recall, our last meeting, the meeting before, we had prostate cancer awareness. And one of the comments was, well, when one has one should remind the other, you know? So if we have to go get mushed, then the guy needs to go get mushed too. But in all sincerity, it's a good way to partner up and both go and be checked. And that way, it's a routine. That's all. Just a reminder in that last meeting that we had where we honored, or we had a proclamation for prostate awareness. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sylvester.
I'll keep this kind of brief and short. Councilmember DiGiovanni, you beat me to the punch.
Oh, what? Law enforcement.
I was going to make mention about how our law enforcement officers, because to make any changes to the uniform, it has to be basically approved, and you cannot just make changes. And to wear the pink patch says a lot in our law enforcement's approach. I try to collect the pink patches from every law enforcement agency, so I write letters and ask if I get them, and I'm doing pretty good. There's, 53 counties in California? But did you folks notice the patch? Did you notice it? Did you know something else? Not only see, Councilmember DiGiovanni picked up on it.
I know my BD. Those
On
stripes.
the stripes. Now, Assistant Chief doesn't have like the sergeant stripes, but he has some other stripes, and that's on and that's on his arm. So each one of those means something, but I'm not really getting on the stripes. I'm getting on that it's pink.
The color. The color.
Usually they just change the patches, and so it takes a lot, because you have to take it to a tailor and take these patches off, put this on, and then after Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and they have to go back and change it back. So it's definitely saying something, because police officers are the ones that you're going to see all the time. So again, kudos and for the awareness. And I have a very busy schedule with all the grandkids. And when my wife says, I got a mammogram, let's go. You don't fool around with that, especially as Councilmember DiGiovanni said, there are resources out there, and just go to get checked. And it's very, very important. So thank you, Daly City PD, and thank you for the awareness and the proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 23, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
I have our first. Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our public appearances and oral communications. We have 3 for general public comment. I will ask Larry Quantz to please come up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Sorry. I'm Larry Quantz. I'm from San Francisco, and I'm coming here today to mention something that could be of interest, in fact, is of interest to all people in Daly City. That's our San Francisco Proposition K that's coming up on the ballot this November. Prop K, for those who don't know, will close the Great Highway permanently to cars and traffic. This is an interest to Daly City residents because a number of them use it on the weekdays for commuting. Right now, it carries about 20,000 cars per weekday. Those cars are going to go onto local streets if Great Highway closes, including Sunset Boulevard and even including 19th Avenue, which is due to be repaved over the next 2 years. So there are going to be lanes taken out of commission there. And I think we can all agree, everyone here, 19th Avenue doesn't need any more cars on it. So closing that roadway is going to be a big problem. Unfortunately, Daly City residents don't get a vote on this. So those against Prop K are trying to speak for you. And it would be a great benefit if any council members here or the council in general could put out a statement of concern regarding this that we could then publish and promote on our website into the general public. It's going to be a very close race. We think we've got the edge. Great Highway is closed on weekends right now for traffic, and it's already a problem in the area for people. And it carries about 1/3 of the traffic on the weekends as it does on the weekdays. And it's especially busy during commute hours when people are trying to get, for instance, to the Veterans Administration Hospital over on Clement and 43rd. And so, again, we're trying to stop that. There are plenty of recreation options available on Great Highway now. There are 2 lanes for pedestrian and bike traffic on either side. So that's more than enough during weekday use. So again, if anyone here wants to speak up on it, we'd welcome it. If you want to go to our website, nopropk.com is the place to get more information. It would be a great benefit if anyone here could speak up on that. And that's all I've got to say. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Norm Torello from MELP. Please come up.
Good evening. My name's Norm Torello, and I represent MELP, Medical Equipment Loan Program. It's a program that makes free medical equipment available to anyone that needs it. In the 30 months that we've been in existence, we've given out almost 4,100 items to people. We are currently located in San Carlos, but it is my sincere desire as a member of the board and as the president to open a North County branch office of MELP. I would love to do that in Daly City. I've had brief conversations with the city manager about perhaps using 31 Bepler in some capacity. But if that doesn't work out, my commitment is strong, and I will find a place, and I would love it to be in Daly City. And I've brought the brochures for you and a little flyer that gives our specifics as to location, times, and things like that. The most important thing is that we make this medical equipment free to anyone that needs it. When they're done with it, they return it to us. They can keep it as long as they'd like. We call it a loan because we want it back, recondition it, and then give it out to others. A very virtuous cycle. So thank you for your attention, and I hope to speak to you again with some good news about opening a North County branch.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker we have is Fernando from Kappa Cultural Center.
All right. Can folks hear me good? Cool. All right. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm here on behalf of Kappa Cultural Center. First of all, happy Indigenous Peoples Day and happy Filipino American History Month. We want to add on to the calendar of all the Filipino events. Kappa Cultural Center is this historic project where we're trying to open up a cafe / cultural center that provides mental wellness, leadership, entrepreneurship skill programs for the youth. And we're finally doing a soft opening on October 25, Friday. And I know the mayor and vice mayor were already invited, but we want to invite you all and the public to come join us. The public will be able to come into the cafe on 12 p.m. It's going to be regular business hours. There's going to be samples of the boba menu that we're going to have for the cafe. I've already tried the turon milk tea boba, which is a twist to the famous Filipino dessert. And we hope that you can come. It's going to be really fun and exciting. And this is really an opportunity for the cultural center and for the wonderful staff to build partnership with the city, because we really think that we can cultivate this nurturing partnership to help serve the community and the public. So I'll see you guys on October 25. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our approval of our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
I have a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Now moving on to item number 9. General Plan Amendment GPA-8-24-16606 and Zone Change ZC-8-24-16607, a revised draft of the housing element adoption and initial implementation measures. And we have Mr. Van Lookhausen, Michael, to do a presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. We've been working on this for quite some time. You remember us coming before you with the housing element and some preliminary meetings. And we're finally here with the housing element for you. The presentation that I have prepared actually consists of a presentation by PlaceWorks, the consultant that actually wrote the housing element in close coordination with the city staff and with considerable public input, as well as we have a presentation by other PlaceWorks staff on the objective design standards. So 2 different PlaceWorks representatives will be speaking with you, to you about this topic, as well as I will also give a portion of the presentation. So we're introducing the housing element itself, as well as implementation measures. And this was explained in the staff report. It's necessary that we do that. We're considerably behind in adopting our housing element, and that sort of forces us to do rezonings early. So with that, I'm going to introduce Cynthia Walsh. She's with PlaceWorks, and Cynthia works in the Sacramento office of PlaceWorks, right close to HCD, which is real important. And Bruce Brubaker and Pranjali Diogal will also be presenting the objective design standards. So without any further delay, we'll turn the mic over to Cynthia.
Okay, great. Good evening, Cynthia Walsh with PlaceWorks. All right, let's jump on in here. So the housing element is one of the 8 mandated elements of the general plan. This housing element is your 6-cycle housing element, and it covers 2023 to 2031. It is unique in that it is reviewed and certified by the State Housing and Community Development Department, also known as HCD. So the housing element has several different pieces to it. We have a review of the previous housing element where we look at the implementation progress of your 5th cycle document. We have a section that discusses your population, housing characteristics, things like that. That's the real data-heavy portion of the document. We have the regional housing needs assessment. This is really the driving factor of the housing element, where you look at your RHNA and how you're going to meet that. We'll touch on that in a minute. We have constraints to housing production. This is looking at any possible barriers with your current standards that are in place. We have the vacant and underutilized land inventory, which plays into the regional housing needs allocation and how we meet that. And then after we've looked at all of those things, we develop goals, objectives, and policies to help move forward with this plan. There are a few new laws that have gone into effect. We have AB 1397. This is the state wanting us to look at specific sizes of sites, so looking at sites that are larger than 1/2 acre and smaller than 10. You can still rely on sites outside of that. Sorry, can you not hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. You can look at sites outside of those sizes, but you do have to do additional analysis. So it doesn't mean you can't include them, you just have to justify why they're appropriate. SB 166, this is no net loss. This is ensuring that you have capacity to meet your RHNA throughout the planning period. So as projects come in and develop, you need to make sure that you're still able to meet that remaining number. And then SB 35 and SB 330 have to do with streamlining of projects as they come in. It's just to remove roadblocks. AB 686 was the big law that passed this cycle. This was a brand new section of your housing element, and this is affirmatively furthering fair housing. So this is identifying any fair housing barriers and then any actions that you're going to move forward to try and accommodate those needs. So the regional housing needs allocation. I'm going to jump into the next slides, which will go into this a little bit more. So the RHNA is broken out into 5 different categories. There's your extremely low. This is looking at 30% or lower of the AMI, area median income. Very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And looking at this next slide, you can kind of see the income categories that go with each of those. And these are based off of a family of 4. So a family of 4 making $156,000 a year is considered low income. Moderate income, 186, and then above moderate, which is really your market rate, is 223. And again, this is a family of 4. So looking at the regional housing needs allocation. So the state hands down a number to your area council of governments. In your case, it is ABAG. ABAG then distributes that to subregions and local governments. And then that is distributed to the city of Daly City. So you can see it goes from the state to the region. The region is almost 500,000 units. And then Daly City received 4,838 units. And those are distributed across all income categories, where you can see here. So of those 4,838 units, you have 1,336 that you need to plan for very low, 769 for low, 762 for moderate, and 1971 for above moderate. Now, these are targets for you to plan for. You're not responsible for building these units. You just need to ensure that there are sites available if a developer wanted to come in and build the units, and then have goals and policies to show how you're going to help facilitate that development. It's not the city's responsibility to actually build these units. So when we're looking at identifying sites to meet the RHNA, obviously we're looking at appropriate sizes. We are looking at vacant and underutilized properties. So underutilized is a property that's either a large site that only a portion of it's being used, a building that could be reused into something else, things like that. And then we're also looking at ways of meeting the RHNA. You can look at anything that has been built or building permits that have been issued. So we can take those right off the top, and then you have your remaining sites that you will use to meet the remaining capacity. So as a part of the meeting the RHNA, we relied heavily on pipeline projects. The city does have several projects in the works here, so you can see the different projects that we are relying on, the total capacity, and then the income unit breakdown. Now, these units do take into account your inclusionary requirements. However, it does also look at just the density. HCD sees density ties density to affordability until it is actually developed. So these are the locations of some of these pipeline projects. I apologize, these sites are really small, but they are available in the document itself as well. So just walking through, these are some of the pipeline projects. You can see the units that we are assuming for these projects, the size, units per acre, the density, and then the affordable breakdown. So 555 low-income units here on Midway. We have the Saramonte Boulevard project. We have the project at Carter Street. You can see again that's 4 acres in size, 81 units to the acre, assuming 10 units moderate there. Southgate Avenue, the Geneva Avenue project, Park Plaza. So really showing how we're reusing the existing land that's within, not looking at rezoning too many properties, but we'll jump into that in a minute. Few more projects here. Density here is 24 units to the acre on 2.38 acres. Now we get to this table, and there's a lot going on here. So you can see on the far left, it's going to show you the RHNA and the breakdown between the income categories. You can see the projects that we're taking credit for that are under construction. We have a total of 63 units. We have our proposed projects. I should note that for our proposed projects, we did decrease so we didn't rely on 100% of those projects. We only relied on 80% to ensure we were not over projecting units. So we discounted those a little bit. We have our vacant site capacity, which is a total of 245 units. So that's what's currently on the ground that's available in land. Underutilized capacity, same there, but looking at reusing sites. Projected ADUs, one way of meeting the RHNA this cycle is looking at accessory dwelling units. So looking at your past trends and then taking that and projecting it out over the next 8 years. So we are projecting out 503 ADUs. distributed again between those income groups. So then you can see our total capacity, which is 3,622. And then on the far right, you can see that we actually are in a shortfall. So that means we need to identify additional properties to ensure that you have that capacity to meet the RHNA. So the biggest shortfall is the 806 units for your lower income. So we need to identify properties that have a 30 units to the acre minimum, or 20 unit minimum, allowing 30 units to the acre to meet that shortfall there. 252 units of moderate that we are short, and then 157 market rate units. So as a part of the rezone program, there are different requirements that come into play. So you need to accommodate obviously 100% of your shortfall, and these need to be allowed by right. So they need to be once they are rezoned, they are just permitted by right. They will come in, show you the project, and move that forward. I'm going to pass this over to Michael to go into the specific rezoning that is going to occur. This is the table, again, in the housing element that has identified the properties that we plan to rezone, the units that we will be able to accommodate on those sites, and then we'll move into how we're going to be in a surplus.
Thank you very much.
Okay, just like Cynthia said, I'm going to give a presentation about the implementation measures, some of the preliminary implementation measures that are necessary to have our housing elements certified by the state. So up until this point, the city staff, together with PlaceWorks, have worked closely with HCD through several rounds of review, and you may have seen it coming through your email, every re-release of the housing element. We've got it to a point where essentially HCD says if your city council adopts the housing element and adopts the implementation measures that I'm about to present to you, we can certify it. And so our goal is to have that done. If you are so willing to adopt the housing element and adopt the implementation measures, we will resubmit the whole thing to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and hopefully have a certification by the end of this year, which seems like a long time, but it does take time to have that agency review the final resolutions and ordinances that would be adopted tonight.
Oh, Mr. Van Lukausen, you
Yes.
answered my question in advance because I wanted to know what would be the timeline in that approval, since, I know you all have been working on this a very long time, and this is really important work that everyone is doing. So thank you for getting ahead of that.
Sure, thank you. Yes, and we were doing it in October for a reason, so that we have enough time by the end of the year. The city has a variety of funding measures, or funding sources rather, that rely on having a certified housing element, and it's very important that we have a certified housing element by the end of this year. So we didn't prepare any slides on that, but there's money coming into the city that is riding on this. And that's sort of the hook the state has, and it's a good hook. It makes cities pay attention. So anyway, without any further delay, I'll kind of get into what the implementation measures are. This is this screenshot, and again, sorry for the small numbers and letters, but essentially this is a list of the sites that we need to rezone to get our rezone capacity up to this the realistic number, which is 1,166 units. Just as Cynthia pointed out, we're using ADU, accessory dwelling unit construction, to also get us there. We've had a robust ADU construction program in Daly City since the 1980s, including legalization of ADUs. And so all of this construction activity does help us get to our realistic rezone capacity. And we're going to talk about each one of the sites here. There's actually no need to read this slide in the subsequent slides. So one of the first sites that we need to change the zoning on is, and the city council may recall, there was actually 323 units that were already approved, and that's already in the pipeline list. But there was a remainder site on this parcel, generally where the A and the P are in APN, that was a hotel site. And we are recommending that the city council redesignate this to residential very high density. And there's also an amendment to the PD zone language wherein we would remove the ability for the hotel site and instead replace it with a residential construction number, which is a 149-unit realistic rezone capacity. So one of the things we're recommending to you is we rezone a portion of this site to allow for residential. And again, this would be by right development. There would be no future public hearings on any of the slides I'm about to present to you, subject to objective design standards. And that is something that's very important because when we do not have the ability to conduct design review, there's no public hearing where we tell the neighbors, hey, this building might get built, and here's what it's going to look like, and there's this public input process about, I don't like the way that looks, and we can massage that. That ability is leaving us. We have the ability, however, at the very beginning to come up with objective design standards, and we're also bringing that, and it was an attachment to the council packet, the objective design standards that would be a part of that. So I just wanted to sort of mention that as an aside in this example.
So for this example that you're mentioning, if and I'm going to ask questions as we go because you have
Absolutely.
very dense material here. This is when you say that it's allowable for residential only. Does the other use that it is at the current state also allowable, or is this now moving to just residential only?
So on the portion of the site that allowed a hotel, the hotel land use is stricken as a allowable use and is replaced by residential only uses.
Okay, so that was definitely my question. I wanted to know if it was still an option, but it sounds like you're saying now it's only moving to residential.
That is correct, yes. And the city staff has had a conversation with the property owner about this, and this site in particular was a direction this property was heading anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's been on the market now for quite a while for a hotel, and it just didn't happen.
Okay.
So it's not a sort of a surprise that this is moving forward in this direction.
Okay. I'm glad that you've been in contact with the owner. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. So the next site is a city-owned property, actually at 6401 Mission. This is just north of the 88 Hillside project. And the site here is actually currently zoned for office uses. And again, this is one of those things that it's just, I think since 2004, 2005 has been zoned for office. And it just hasn't happened. We've actually had a private development project that's been developed here, and that it didn't happen either. So it's sort of moving in the direction of residential. And so we are also recommending, this is PD zoning. So the PD zoning language to amend this to a residential only, subject to objective design standards, is also before the city council.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this piece of property that we're talking about right now, it's within, so if they were thinking, you're saying since 2000, so 20 years you've been waiting for someone to develop it for office use, correct?
Yes, that's a simplification,
Well,
but
I
yes,
mean,
that is true. The market hasn't brought us an office use.
Right, but it was zoned for that, 2004, 2005.
That's correct, right.
And so when we look at this piece of property, how high would this be?
So
22 units.
thank you. It's actually, I think that's a typo. It's more units than that, and if you'd like, I can look up the exact number.
Sure.
But to answer your question, so these sites along Mission Street, and one of the things that the state has required us to do is to raise the building height limits on Mission Street.
7 stories.
Yeah, so it's essentially, so when the CMU zone was adopted by the city council in November, we allowed 10-story buildings, and HCD, through its density calculations and building height calculations, in order for us to achieve the realistic capacity and affordability numbers, that the targets that we needed to hit required that we add essentially 2 more stories of construction onto Mission Street parcel. So essentially 12-story buildings, yes. That's not to say that the market will bring us development at that, but we are required to rezone, as Cynthia explained, and provide zoning that allows for that.
I get it.
Yes.
So next question is parking. So we went through this when I was on planning,
Yeah.
so I had a taste of it. And my concern was I like the idea that you're able to have objective design standards up front, so we could at least voice our concerns. Parking, you know,
Right.
if you're 12 stories, what are you blocking? Who's light, who's wind, all that. But, and I understand with the state, that's not a priority, parking. So my concern would be if we put, and you said 22 units is not, it's more like what? If it was 12 stories?
Yeah, let's actually find out real quick. I apologize for that type.
Sure, no, don't even worry about it.
Maybe actually we go back a slide. Actually, let's look here. It's just easier to look at this. Maximum density. It's a 6401 mission.
Looks like 75
Yeah, about 75. Yeah,
maximum density.
sure. Yeah, 75 dwelling units per
75?
acre. Yeah, and so, yeah, the maximum number of residential units looks to be, yeah, about 60, 70 units. Yeah. This is, however, it should be said that, again, though, we would allow a much taller building than would be currently allowed. So it could be more units than that. This is just our target inside the realistic rezone capacity number.
Okay. And so again, my concern would be for the residents or the businesses that are in that vicinity. It's my understanding, it's been a few months, but would parking be something that was off the table, or would we be able to bring up our objective design standards to try to incorporate that?
So the objective design standards that apply in the CMU zoning district, actually, this is a PD zoning district. Let me get back on the right slide. This is PD zoning. So it's because you're asking about Mission Street in general and maybe this in particular, and there are a little bit of different things. But to answer your question about parking in general, there's a new law called AB 2097 that essentially prohibits cities from requiring parking if you're within a half mile of high-quality transit. This site absolutely is within that distance, and so would be required to provide essentially no parking. The state of California and the state legislature, if you will, has basically prioritized, if you will, housing development over the construction of parking. And it's something that sure we may not all agree on, but it actually is the law. So that is essentially the answer to your question. There are portions of Mission Street, because we have the Colma BART station, of course, to the south, and the Daly City BART station to the north. And we're a little off topic, but I'll just explain it real quick. The circles around those two stations are not, they don't overlap. And so what happens is that we have to look at the Mission Street bus service. There's a definition of headways for high-quality transit that then we also need to look at. So it's very likely that no construction on Mission Street would be required to provide parking.
And so the reason why I'm asking this question is we lose the right to ask for it. And as you know, and everyone here knows, is that people have complained about parking. So that was the reason why I asked the question, and I knew that being on the Planning Commission, we discussed this.
Right.
And it's a concern, but we are going to hear about it should then we start having high-density projects built.
Sure,
That's
it's a possibility.
Yeah.
The hope is with less parking or attracting residents and purchasers of or renters or owners of the units that are less inclined to drive vehicles, that are more inclined to use public transit. And that's the theory behind it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you on this item, and then I'll get to you, council member. I do remember that we did have an approval on this site at some time ago for this particular parcel. I think there was a developer that was going to use prefabricated. So my history, I'm going back in time, but then later on they decided to they didn't have the development funds. Is that correct?
That's true. I don't know if that ever came to the city council as a land use entitlement, It might have been discussed as part of the disposition of the property through the Housing Finance Agency.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So
And that's
there
right. Everything you said is true. They,
was a potential of housing being built there.
right.
Yeah.
And I think COVID was sort of a reason for that, and the effects on the marketplace that resulted from that were probably a factor.
Good.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but in theory, something like that could come back here, and that's very likely what we would see as a project. And it's probably important to note it would probably be more than that number of units that I'd mentioned there. Yeah. So that's rezone site 8. So if you,
Councilmember DeJuani.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, about the parking, so we currently even have at top of the hill that senior housing that has no cars, but has a lot of vacancies. But again, like she was saying, if we're mandated that they have that law, we've had so many laws being passed down, then I don't know, people may need a caregiver to have a car. They may need to, I can't imagine, like even at the senior housing, they have to carry their groceries or have to take a taxi cab or rely on friends. I mean, realistically, which I guess I'll have to talk to the state legislatures, not you, that not having any vehicle even come, like a visitor, like their grandchildren if it's a senior or whomever, that's not even realistic, right? In my head, like most of us have a car, and it's harder for us not to get around, even if we had a taxi cab or the expensive one. So I get that we're trying to push people to public transit, but we also, again, maybe that's something that our council or whomever we can get support to do something. Is that to have zero parking available that currently has, I don't know what the vacancy rate is at the senior housing, but it's constantly vacant because no one can have a car. I get plenty of calls saying, I would love to go there, but I have a car. So, and that's nothing that you had any control over, but I'll just bring it up as she did for concern when we do these developments. So how many developments do we have proposed near transit that would qualify for no parking?
currently proposed,
Yeah. Zero parking.
that qualify under AB 2097,
Correct,
there
under
are
that.
a couple of projects in plan check in the pipeline. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Just-
how many units would that be?
What I wanted to say is, while the state's saying we can't require the parking, that doesn't mean that they can't provide the parking. So developers are gonna be sensitive to the market. So while we can't say, you need to provide 100 spaces, they're gonna look at what makes sense to them. And so if they're in an area where providing some parking makes their project work financially, then they will be providing parking because it works for them. So I don't know that we would expect that every development will have zero parking. I think we'll still see parking. It just won't be at a rate that we will be mandating.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next site is the rezoning of parcels adjacent to Seton Medical Center. And there are 4 of these parcels, and these parcels provide an 815-unit realistic rezone capacity. So the city staff is these are in the Sullivan Corridor specific plan area. And they're currently designated as hospital, which is a fairly restrictive zoning, allowing only, again, hospital uses. And uses, I believe, that support hospitals, subject to a use permit approval. The owners of these parcels, together with these parcels and the parcel on a subsequent slide, approached the city a while back about creating a wellness village, which essentially would introduce residential uses onto the site. In conversations with the representatives from AHMC, we decided that these could potentially be used in our housing element, because one of the things that the state allows us to do is if we've had conversations with developers about and have been presented, even if it's an informal application, some desire to have residential construction, we can include those in our list. And so we did do that. And the parcels are proposed for, again, redesignation to the residential high-density designation in the Sullivan Corridor Specific Plan area, and rezoning to the R3 designation also. So we have also proposed changes to the R3 zoning district and the RH zone in the Sullivan Corridor Specific Plan to essentially allow buildings up to 120 feet tall. And that's an important thing to tell you and to disclose to you. It's because, again, development here would be, moving forward, would be by right. So there would be no discretion other than well, there's no discretion. It's just there's a review against the objective design standards. And there's also no CEQA that's required because CEQA only applies to discretionary projects. There's some exceptions to that, but in general, that is without CEQA review. And so the city, when it proposed the rezonings at the Planning Commission level, did send out, of course, notice to all of the neighbors who are within 300 feet of the boundaries of any parcel that was being rezoned. All of our rezone sites and any parcel that was being, or any property owner that was in 300 feet of a R3 zoned property for which the development regulations were changing. And again, to allow the taller buildings, because we think it's just fair to let neighbors know. And so at the Planning Commission meeting, there was some discussion from the public about this. And that's all outlined in your staff report. And just to let you know that some of the LCC court residents did have some concerns about that. But again, so these are the Seton parcels being proposed for rezoning, and they result in an 815-unit
Before you go on, I definitely have some questions on this site.
Yeah.
You know, currently on the 2 or 4 parcels that you mentioned, what is the height of those buildings right now, and what are the current use of all those 4?
Yeah, so the current height is actually not regulated, and that's actually a really good question and sort of a good point, thinking about it. There is no height regulation currently on the 4 parcels. They are designated HOSP in the Sullivan Corridor Specific Plan. Tatum, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any height limitation at all.
Were you asking what the height regulation is, and also wanted to know what the use is to date? You said it's hospital use.
Right.
So what are those 4 parcels being used for right now?
Right. So just moving from left to right, it's kind of hard to see, and it would be easier with an aerial, but I'm going to answer that question in general. Some of the parcels provide parking for Seton Hospital.
Okay. You could just say easy, 120, 110, 180, all of the
so
3 numbers
Right. So 120 and 110 at their flatter portions near San Fernando Way provide, I believe, parking for Seton Hospital. To varying degrees, you know, of whether that parking's being used, but there are parking lots in that area. So part of the Wellness Village construction, in theory, would provide some replacement parking, very likely for the hospital use. APN 008-520-180 also provides, again, in its more flat portions on the northerly portion of that site, parking lot for Seton Hospital. So there's no actual buildings and there's no hospital buildings, but there are parking fields, and those can be accommodated through future development as a replacement.
Okay, so for clarification, you're stating that all 4 parcels right now are being used for parking?
The 3 to the left, the parcel on the
What's 190?
190 has a small residential structure. I believe Daughters of Charity actually owns that parcel. And we've had a conversation with Daughters of Charity about the rezoning. They didn't seem to be opposed to it, but it again, would be part, and it is part of the Wellness Village concept. It's our understanding that there's some movement to have that included in the the development of the Wellness Village, so we did include it, and it was included, and we attached to your staff report the letter from HMC and the graphic they provided to us. So, and that's why it was included.
I think, just being very mindful when we do land use changes.
Yes.
I think that's why I'm asking a lot of questions here, specifically around a hospital that we all dearly love, that this can like trigger other kind of not necessarily, I just want to be very mindful that we want Seton Hospital to remain, but whenever you do land use changes, there could be triggers to other ideas of the land, right? And so for me, I understand that they're talking about a wellness, you're saying a wellness village, and the idea of that is, I don't know, it's conceptual, right? But that's why I had more questions because, this is a very important asset in our community, and I understand that HMC wants to do something around a wellness village. I know we need to approve this document, but this is a huge land use change.
Sure.
I know that we're not touching the medical center. That's going to be hospital use. But everything around it is definitely a big change. So to me, there's definitely more questions in that regard. When they had proposed a wellness village, what are they entailing?
I think what's thought of there is that the housing would be used by Seton staff. That was a concept. Given the number of units,
Okay, so there's a concept, because when I hear wellness, please continue, and then I'm gonna ask.
Yeah, and I was kind of looking around me. I think one of the representatives from HMC was going to be here. I don't know if they were able to make it, but they could probably better describe that. But the way that it was communicated to us is that it would provide, again, housing for support services, support staff at the hospital, people who work there. Obviously, the number of units would, to me anyway, indicate that people from outside that community could also live here as well. And it was essentially that. But it is a residential land use. And just to be very clear with you, the city of Daly City wouldn't be, in this proposal and the way we've written it anyway, sort of mandating that had to happen. It is essentially a multifamily rezoning. But that is the concept that was communicated to us.
Yeah, that's why I'm a bit concerned in this regard, understanding we need to find so many units. But given it's so closely adjacent to where Seton Medical Center is, that's where my concern is.
Sure.
Around the approvals of this, because you just mentioned, look, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll become a wellness village. There's no contractual there's not an approval of that. But if we approve this, you're telling me already that there's not going to be a process in which they have to go through at planning. And so this is not necessarily a small decision. Obviously, we're going through the whole document. But this can definitely impact some changes within the area.
Certainly.
and
And
so-
that's a very good point.
Yeah,
I
and I
think-
think,
Yeah.
just,
One of the things to consider is that the hospital itself, just like any enterprise, needs to have a certain number of parking spaces. There is probably a requirement, I don't know that there is, that the hospital has with the landowner, that a certain number of parking spaces be provided to serve the hospital. It's also worth noting, at least at its current capacity, that, and this is an anecdotal observation, that the parking lots aren't always full. I don't know if the council members themselves have made any observations of that, but the city staff has, and again, anecdotal observation, those parking lots are not full. So, and again, maybe the hospital isn't operating at full capacity. And, so if the hospital wants to operate in a, healthy manner, that's maybe a pun, but, and make sure that the hospital remains, a certain number of parking spaces would
I
need to
think
remain.
it's when I hear wellness village and you explained it. Now, workforce housing to me makes more like sense. Okay, you're gonna have workforce housing. There's obviously a need for our community, and that's why we have these RENA numbers. So, but when I hear wellness village, I don't understand what that entails.
Sure.
And so when you broke it down as far as, okay, it's for the hospital workers, right? And obviously this is a different, we're in a different world where we have to approve this housing element. And at this point, like, we're approving something where it's not an understanding, and I just want to tell the audience, that's why I'm asking a lot of questions, that usually there's a process that goes with when you have these buildings come up. They go through the planning commission, they come through us. Now, when we decide today, to go approve this document, that means they can build whatever housing there is that we approve today. They don't have to go through another process.
That's correct.
And they can build. So that's why there's a lot more questions I'm having right now. And if the audience or people are watching, this is for me, like, we need to really have these critical questions. And that's why I had asked you, what is a wellness village? Is it workforce housing? What type of housing is going to be there? Is it going to be, when you say multi-family, what did we allocate there? And it could be condos, it could be apartments, right? It's basically meeting the RENA numbers. But when we do the allocation, is there a certain amount of what is low, moderate, in these parcels?
Yes.
I want to know what those numbers are.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
And that is described in the first table that's on the screen, and we can
Okay.
definitely take a look at those numbers.
Yeah.
We make, when we talk about the distribution of income levels through the building, there are some assumptions made about that.
Okay.
The city of Daly City only mandates that compliance with the city's affordable housing ordinance. But there's assumptions made that given that a building is going to be at a certain density in this marketplace, that certain affordability levels will be reached. And those assumptions are made essentially by the city. The city's consultant throws numbers out at the state, and they say, yes, based on our density calculations, we agree with that. And so we've arrived at the answer to your question, and that's shown, and I wish we had it.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
To see. And then,
Yeah.
Councilmember Hannah. Then
So-
get through this.
Yeah.
To understand what the numbers are, and then I'll get
Yeah,
to you.
that'd be great.
Okay. So if we go to page 161 of the housing element, there is a breakdown, and because there's 4 different parcels, it has different, a different set of numbers.
Okay.
But yeah, we can do some math, and yeah, you'd have to turn to, it's almost easier if you just look at it yourself. If you go to page 161,
Right, I'm there.
yep, and it's table HE 52. It's on the bottom half of the page. You can see where the, probably the easiest thing to target is the HOSP designated parcels. It's the bottom 4 parcels. And if you look at the, if you follow across to the right-hand side of the table, you'll look at the lower income unit number.
Okay.
And just looking at the screen, I believe it's,
So
test my eyesight
182,
here.
99, 138.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And so if we approve, go ahead.
It's 530 is the answer.
Okay,
yeah.
530. And so if we approve this, and it's about 530 units they would have to build, that would be on lower income.
Well, that's the presumption of affordability. It really depends on what they actually propose, because the city has an affordable housing ordinance. And it depends on whether it's rental or if it's for
Got it.
sale.
It's tied in, so they still have to go through our affordable
Yes,
housing
that
ordinance.
absolutely applies.
And then
Yeah.
whatever they propose, but I'm a little confused because you're saying they can build what they want to build, right? Because when we pass this, and then you're saying they still have to go through our affordable housing ordinance. And so,
That's not considered a discretionary, see, because it's an ordinance that says you
Yeah.
must do this.
Yeah.
That's not considered discretionary review.
okay, so they have to go through our affordable housing.
Absolutely. All of the projects that we're talking
Through,
about still do.
and
Yeah.
I guess the last question, and then I'll hand it over to you, Teresa, Councilmember Prano, is when they propose their project, when are they tied to that ordinance? Because, I mean, you're saying we don't have to go through an approval process.
Right.
Right? So I'm
Right.
trying to find out now the implementation of what the state is allowing us to do, or the state is mandating us to do.
Sure.
And then how it's gonna come out in our approval process as a body and a
Right.
council.
Right.
So, we're all going through this for the first time or whatnot. And so I'm just trying to go through that, right?
Right. Right.
And so when we come to that place where the ordinance, they have to actually comply with, where does that land?
That lands at the building permit stage,
And not at the council?
not at the council. Yes.
Okay,
Because
so that's really different.
it's
That's a
really different.
whole different.
Sure it
yeah.
is. Yeah.
It is, because, so they go to the count and then staff will be making sure and implementing that piece of it.
That's right. And actually, we can talk about that for a few minutes because we're still kind of formulating how larger projects that are not subject to any discretionary approvals, meaning planning commission and city council, would sort of move through the process. And what we think will probably happen is that we'll have some sort of we have something called pre-application conference already, and we'll have a meeting with city staff to talk about the various, is there sewer service to serve a building like this? What's the water pressure need to be? And what improvements may need to happen in the street to get the water pressure where it needs to be? This sort of thing. And one of the components of that conversation will have to be affordability of the units. The city council has adopted an affordable housing ordinance, as you're aware, and it would be at that time that we would communicate that to the applicant. So they would come in with some very preliminary plans, and before they go to construction drawings, before they make any decision about whether they want to build their building, we will need to be communicating what sort of infrastructure is needed to build this, as well as the affordable housing component.
Thank you. I know you have our consultants here, and obviously every other jurisdiction is going through their own processes.
Yes.
I think I'd love to know further research on what other jurisdictions are doing. Is it going to the building and, permits? Is that where it's headed? Is it another processes? Like, I'd like to understand, because obviously this is just being created, and our old process was planning department, us as city council as a body. And I'd like to know what also other cities are doing. Because this is, the checks and balances are changing.
Yeah, I can answer that. It's a great question. So because you're in a shortfall situation, meaning you did not currently have enough sites in your city zoned appropriate to meet your RENA, you fall into what HCD terms a by right rezone. So any jurisdiction in that boat has to follow this same process. So for example, the city of Cupertino, we just did this exact same thing for them. So they are also following a by right approval process, meaning it's just approved at staff level.
Okay, so can you explain how a city becomes or falls into a shortfall? How are we designated to become, like, hey, you have a shortfall?
Sure. So when you receive your allocation from ABAG and you do an inventory of your sites, if you are able to rezone prior to the due date of the housing element, which was January 2023, pardon me, if you were rezoned prior to that, then you would not fall into the by right rezone. But most jurisdictions, that's not the case. Most jurisdictions, as you start your housing element update, you take an inventory of your available sites, you identify if you have enough sites or not, and then you rezone as a part of your update, which is where we are right now.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Prime.
Thank you. So a couple things. Number one, if I recall at a meeting, is it Seton Medical Center within a certain number of years needs to be rebuilt? Is that correct? And that, it was a number of years, not that many years ago, actually, that due to seismic and different things like that, the hospital, the medical center, needed to be rebuilt somewhere else. And perhaps, if I remember correctly, the building, it's due to having people within it, so it could be used for storage or if they didn't tear it down. So my question is, once you're taking away parcels, right, parking parcels, or where the nuns' housing used to be, then where does the new hospital get built? In that, our concern is we have, it's important to have a hospital in the city of Daly City. We're, if we're not the first, we're the second largest city in the county. Sure. And so our concern is Seton Medical Center. That's one question, and I do recall that came up a few years back, so I'm guessing it's still in the works somehow. The other thing is, just piggybacking on Mayor Manalo, workforce housing, how important that is, as well as having a say, hopefully, and I'm not sure if we will, have a say in that they use union labor and have fair labor benefits and pay. So before all this happens, when we lose the opportunity to look at a project in planning and then coming here to the dais, we lose that opportunity for the checks and balances to make sure things are what it should be. That's another question. And then another question would be, once we fulfill these numbers, what happens in the year after and the year after? I mean, when does it stop? Is there a stop in fulfilling numbers, and do every year that we fulfill and we get to fulfill to a certain point, what happens the next year and the year after that?
Well, this housing element takes us through the RENA 6 cycle, which is through essentially the year 2032. And then after that, there'll be another housing element that will have to be developed. And we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But yes, it's a valid question. Going back to your question about the reconstruction of Seton Medical Center, and all the time that I've worked here, I've never heard of that as a concept of completely tearing the hospital down and reconstructing it somewhere else. Now, the hospital has proposed and undertaken, I believe, some seismic retrofits because OSHPD had required that. And I don't know where they are with their phasing of that. But yeah, that's happened. As far as the city staff is aware, there isn't any reason why structurally the hospital couldn't continue to be.
There was a community meeting a few years back at Pacelli Gym, and so they spoke about it. Now, perhaps they were speaking about it, and then they did seismic, and so, I mean, I don't know that. I'm just curious is if it was still on the table that they had to rebuild, then taking up these parcels would be a concern.
Certainly.
Right?
Right.
You understand that. So, but if in turn they've taken the opportunity to do seismic retrofitting,
It seems like that's been the direction to us.
then the hospital stands as is. Okay. And then with regards to workforce housing, it would be a huge opportunity, right? So would we not be able to have a say in that? Or, if something would be to be built and 530 units, not just doctors and nurses, but, all the different staffs that they have to run Seton Medical Center, one of the largest businesses in the city of Daly City. You would hope that there would be a way to have a say in workforce housing or some part of this projects. And see, that's a concern where we are saying right now, we're going to vote on something, and then everything else is going to be over the counter, right? It's going to go to your department. So how far do you and your staff have in a say? Is it more of the, oh, here you go, and a rubber stamp, and they're going to move on, and all of a sudden we're going to have something built? Is there any way we have a say with regards to these larger businesses to have union labor and to have that? So those are some questions that, I hate to think that we're washing our hands at this point and we just giving it, okay, approval, and then we can't do anything about it later. That's a concern.
And
Sure.
Mayor Manalo.
I think around the labor piece, which you brought up, which is very important, and I'll agree with you. So prior to one of our initial, I think probably before you were appointed in April, we did include labor language in the housing element. And it's 19.1. It establishes a past list of local labor, unions, and apprenticeship programs on the city's website to encourage developers and contractors to hire local labor. Also encourage developers and contractors to evaluate their hiring process. So we did work on putting this and codifying it in the housing element. To make sure that they're hiring from apprenticeship programs, and also making sure that there's resources for labor compliances and for providing living wages.
May I
And
ask?
we did not, that's still in there.
It is in there, yes.
But what I heard, and
It's-
thank you for finding that. What I heard though was encourage.
Yeah. I was
So
about to
that's
point that out.
sorry about that.
Yes.
But I heard encourage,
Yes.
and so that we can encourage and it not happen. So that's, and I'm glad there's something there. But on the other hand, encourage is not doing.
As an absolute mandate, you're right.
Through the chair.
Councilmember.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Michael, here we go. More questions, just like, thank you for everything and all the hard work you've done, and especially our Place Works team. But since this time, as we all know, the Attorney General has filed suit against AHMC because they have a non-compliance for the conditions of violations that have occurred on the original conditions. She was asking what was done from before when the AG implemented almost a 5-year implementation of certain conditions that they had to provide certain services and maintain those services, both in the coast side and both in the main hospital. Well, Supervisor Ray Mueller contacted Anna Eshu, and because it was closed down, they transported without asking the AG and many other things in our hospital that have not been held to compliance. So recently, the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, has filed suit against HMC. And so I would like to tell, I think it's prudent for us, because it's clear that we care about our community hospitals staying, and that we have caution, as the mayor alluded to, when you rezone it from hospital to residential, and it's clear from the state mandate, we have lost local control in a lot of our decision-making as council members and elected officials here on this board. And that, to me, I personally think that we should table the resolution for AHMC and anything that's applicable to it, given the fact that they currently have had a lawsuit against them officially filed, and the complaint has been filed through the state and with Rob Bonta. So I think that's if they can't fix what they have now, we have no guarantee that any of this will occur at all. So for me, on my stance, and I do know that I have to say, We may disagree on a lot of things, but I think my council really cares at our community hospital and cautionary. I think the mayor even alluded, if you take that step, then what next? I have to give her credit for that, what's the next step that's gonna happen? Because once we rezone that part, and are we allowed to approve the element, given the fact if we table all that, given the litigation that is occurring with the Attorney General, with AHMC, to approve something like this, I don't think it'd be prudent on our behalf, our city or our council to do so. And so if we were able to remove that, will we still be able to allocate housing and our housing element if we were to take it out? And of course, that's up to, each individual up here. But I do hear them, and I think that the alarm bells go off when I read the complaint that Anna Eshu had called the Attorney General, and then it was filed based on facts. So that is alarming for me, and I cannot support anything. And I wanted, out of respect for the Attorney General as well, this is all new to us, and we need to protect our hospital and everything around it, because that's all we have up here. And that is pretty scary. And then when she was talking about, it was the retrofitting, and they did take 10 million, I believe, from the county, along many other monies in the agreement, so that they could help start, the transfer from the bankruptcy for AHMC to do that at the Pacelli Gym. And they did agree to those conditions. And according to Barack Bonta, those conditions have been violated. So I want to put that out there. And I, for one, support tabling this, anything related to it, the resolution, anything applicable to the rezoning when it comes to the hospital site or AHMC's current wellness package and anything related to that. I just can't do that. And as far as the labor ordinance, Councilmember Sylvester and I had been working on a labor ordinance. It's called a hard hat ordinance. So I think that that's great to hear. There's a lot of support here, and that maybe we can do that. And once we have our own labor ordinance, then they have to hold it, because it'll be our own labor ordinance. And I think that I see here a lot of support and unity on our council for our community in that manner. So that slippery slope, we cannot cross. So I rest in tabling everything, the resolution and everything applicable at this point with the AHMC, who has a suit against them from the Attorney General for noncompliance of the conditions. Our community is at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, for those comments. And that's why from the beginning of the slide, there was many questions in regards to this.
Yeah, I thank you, Mayor, for asking those questions. I thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, because it will trigger, and I thank you for your comments as well. In regards to this community asset that we know we all hold dearly. Many people have been saved from seeing the hospital. Many of our most vulnerable go to it. And, this is a big decision to do. And exactly, we won't have any local control on this issue. And so in that regard, I think that, given what has transpired, this is about, is it 1,000? No, it's about 800 units.
Yes.
You said, pardon me, 530?
It's 815.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then there's another seat-known site at Southgate and Cerro, that's 179. That was going to be the last one.
179 units in that respect. Okay. Yeah, this is a really big decision, given
Absolutely.
the fact that that's why I had to ask what those all were, and around a site that is they're not touching the hospital use, but when you change land use, everything around it,
Right.
it can change things very dramatically and quickly,
Sure.
or potentially around development. And yeah, I think that I know that it would be different if we didn't have the opportunity to have the planning weigh in, or for us as a local government to weigh in. I think it would be different, right? If it was before, where our housing element, how it was dictated before, let's create a plan, and then it still would go through kind of our checks and balances. I can see this and being like, okay, well, it could be a possibility. But the fact that we decide today, and then we basically are changing the dynamics of that area that can affect the hospital. For me, it's a decision that isn't folded into just this very large plan. It's a big decision.
Sure.
And I would probably also, I understand we have to weigh things, and the approval of this
Sure.
is important as well, because we get,
Millions of dollars, sure.
we get millions of dollars for affordable house, or
It's for
what is,
It's for maintaining the city's roads, actually.
oh, for
Part of it.
maintaining.
Part of it's for affordable housing construction. Part of it, specifically 493 Eastmore funding, is part of the equation. Yeah, I think one of the things that, and David Ney also is here, he can help address the whole question about the wellness village. He doesn't work for HMC, but he's the developer that's essentially been hired to bring this to the city, so he can answer any questions that you have about that, and how potentially that development of the parcels can actually help the hospital financially. Because if they're not doing anything for the hospital aside from providing parking lots that may be underutilized, there is a concept that bringing money into the revenue stream of this group of properties could actually be something positive. And David can help answer some of those questions.
May I, real quick? I've been up there when there's no parking, and you're going in circles. So to say that this parking is underutilized, I don't believe that is absolutely correct. And because it's at the top of the hill there, people, doctors, staff, nurses, whatever, they're coming from somewhere and they need to park their vehicles. So granted, yes, right now they're using the parking. But if we decide, we say, it's blanketed and we say yes to this, then the concerns for people's parking, does it happen to be you build and they say, the state of California says 0 parking, and then the people who work in the hospital, have nowhere to go. So that's a concern. And I really do, and I'm sorry, I don't know if there's a way to do this project without including these parcels, but I would say that, and I know how long you've worked on this, so, we don't doubt how much work has gone into it. But the concern of Seton Medical Center, the concern of the property.
Sure.
And once rezoning it, and then also, as the mayor said, we no longer have hands-on.
Sure. And the no hands-on thing is happening statewide. That is by design, just to be clear to you. Every city in California is subjected to the very exact concern you have. The state of California has decided that it wants to have a resident, the importance of building places to live for Californians is so important. They have made a very conscious decision to have a system of building permit approvals that does not include public input. That is by design. We thought it might be a good idea to bring up an aerial that shows the actual parking fields that are provided for Seton. I've confirmed with David actually that there is not an agreement with the hospital that it has with the property owner about providing parking, although it would behoove the hospital to have something like that in the future. And it very likely, construction of buildings would include some sort of parking provision for the hospital itself. But we did want to provide this screen to you because there was a question about how much parking is provided on these sites and how much of the parking is used. Again, anecdotally, the city staff has visited these parking lots, and as kind of shown on the screen, and I don't know if this is on a Saturday, and the hospital operates 7 days a week, but we do see that, and granted, the parking, and we're just looking at the one off San Fernando, is largely empty. And this is just coincidentally that we brought up the aerial from Google Images. It's these parking lots can be replaced when the residential construction occurs. And everything that you're saying is true. The city wouldn't have any way of requiring that as a compulsory measure to development. But that's something that it's true. The hospital would have to work out with the developer. And I don't know if David can speak to that. As some sort of comfort to you. I don't know that it would be much more than that because, again, we couldn't put it in the element itself that it had to happen, that the replacement parking had to happen, as far as I know. And to answer Councilmember DiGiovanni's question, no, we can't just adopt the housing element without adopting the rezonings. It is a somewhat of a rewrite of the entire element, not the entire element. That's maybe
You
a bit
mean
much.
that?
We would have to
You
go
mean
look.
without this piece of it?
That's right.
Rezoning the hospitals.
Right, may as well not adopt the housing element at all, really. The rezones are part and parcel of what make the housing element be certifiable by the state. If we go to the state tomorrow and say the city council actually didn't rezone the seat and parcels, they have a lot of concerns about doing that, we will,
Can we
we'll be months back.
Michael, with all due respect, can we divvy up the 530 units that's needed for the thing into other development?
Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he was talking to me,
please.
though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he was talking, sorry.
But we did want to provide some sort of to provide an image to you of where the parking was off San Fernando. One of the parcels has a little, actually where the arrow is, has a small parking field there. These parcels are not entirely covered by parking lots, and that's really what we wanted to illustrate to you.
Mayor?
Yes,
Quick question.
Vice
So,
Mayor.
Michael, so that one sliver part is parking, and then from the map that you showed us, there's like a downhill slope, and it looked like it was at the edge of those neighborhoods. Is that development included in that area?
Yes, it is. Okay. Right to the east of Olsesi Court.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's several parcels. Maybe I'll use the mouse. So there's a parcel here that does include, I believe this is a very small parking lot here. So there's a parcel there. And then there's another parcel here. And this is a larger parking lot. And then this is one of the parcels that kind of goes off screen down here. And then another parcel here. This is probably, yeah. So just in terms of parking loss and a concern about the impact of reduced parking, I think maybe what your concern is hurting the viability of the hospital. So any replacement of parking would have to be in the number of spaces here, assuming that this is fully utilized, and there's no way to provide the parking elsewhere on the other, the Seton parcel that is not being rezoned, and then the parking spaces here.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
So if we didn't pass this, we get fined.
We lose, no, we don't get fined. We by the end of the year, the state will not have certified our housing element. And then through, we would lose essentially MTC money for, again, public works type projects, road resurfacing. I'm not familiar with the exact where that money would be spent, but it's items like that.
So, pardon me. So someone or this department, they looked at the city of Daly City and they said, this is where you can build. and we went with it. So are you telling me there's nowhere else in the city of Daly City that can make up for those parcels
Yes.
that we're saying we're concerned about?
At least with the current ownership pattern, if you will, there is nothing else. One of the reasons the housing element took so long to submit to the state was that we had to have Ceremony Del Rey approved. There was no reason to submit a housing element to the state of California without having that project given some sort of a green light. And so once that project was approved, we were able to submit the housing. That was 23% of our arena. These sites, David's company came to us representing HMC, sort of landed in our lap as a way to get us over the. So Ceremony Del Rey didn't even do it. We needed these sites too, and there are other commercially zoned parcels out there, but they're not they're sites that we couldn't add to the RENA because they're owned by other agencies. They're commercially zoned. And there's no guarantee that there's going to be any sort of residential proposed on them. We have to have a developer in front of us that says we're actually interested and gives us some drawings or something that's, shows some interest. So then the state will say, well, we believe you that there could be residential on this. Go ahead and rezone it and we'll accept those as sites. And that's what's happened.
One more question.
Go ahead,
Okay,
and then
thank
I have a question.
And so when this development, or the thoughts of this development, and you had talks, and I guess I'm referring to the gentleman, you've spoken with Seton Medical Center, the powers that be there, and told them about your thoughts and what you're thinking about doing. What was Seton Medical Center's response? Could he speak on that?
Sure, absolutely. This is David Ney.
Thank you, David.
Hi, David. Welcome.
Hi, thank you all. I'm very impressed with Daly City and the leadership to be working on a national holiday evening. So thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And, I am David Nia. I'm CEO of AGI Avant. AGI Avant has built several thousand units of housing in the 9 counties around the Bay Area. And we think this is a fantastic site to create what we call this wellness village. And we not only see it as a wellness village, we see it as an intergenerational wellness village. So we are planning to have senior living on site. 2 types. One is called a continuous care retirement community, which takes folks through end of life. And that's why it's good to have it right next to the hospital, because we've got all that subacute and acute care that will be needed. The other is senior living for rent. And those are folks that may not be able to afford that, but are on Medicare and Medi-Cal checks. In addition, we're looking at building what we're calling attainable housing, which is workforce housing. There have been so many different terms, 80% to 120% AMI, average median income for a county. But what we like to think of it is that it makes sense relative to the market. I heard the comments earlier about the market. And because the Daly City requirements, we're looking at doing this for rent, and therefore providing 10% below market rate units spread out evenly through our developments. In total, as you can see, between the 2 sites, there's the main site up here by the main campus. There's a site on Southgate, 1500 Southgate, 2 blocks to the south, where looked in discussions with AMC to do that as a phase 1 because it's a satellite site and we can get the housing up relatively quickly without affecting hospital operations. One of the reasons we've taken, we started this process with AHMC 2 years ago. And as Councilmember DiGiovanni probably well knows, I think AHMC bought the site out of bankruptcy along with the Coastside site in Moss Beach. In August of 2024, we met them, August 2020, we've met them in August of 2022, 2 years ago. So in that time, we've been doing market studies. We've been looking at construction costs, as it continues to shape and return since COVID. We've been looking at what type of people are working here, and your Mayor Manal is exactly right. This is the largest employer, I believe, in Daly City with 2,200 employees, and and we are totally in agreement. As AGI, our credo, our motto really is all centered around sustainability, around environment, as well as around social sustainability. So we also have been in business for 25 years. We've had 3 rounds of backing from CalPERS. We've informally spoken to CalPERS about the site. They would be very excited because I think some of their constituents would also benefit from this. So long story short is I cannot speak for AHMC, but I do know that from our discussions and 2 years relationship with them, we had an LOI in place. We've had lots of consultations in between, designing the program together. And on the matter of parking, currently there's over almost 2,000 parking spaces on site, which includes a multi-story parking structure just to the north of the hospital. You can see at the top of the screen, and 3 or 4 additional lots there. So it's a notion of how to redistribute the parking, but also make up and provide enough parking adjacent to the right programmatic pieces within the hospital. And from that, what we do is, because we take advantage of the hillside site, we tuck in some parking under our developments and condoize it back to the hospital. So we have a term sheets with all these in place. The hospital has, to my knowledge, originally budgeted $40 million for the seismic retrofit, which it began with the general contractor Swinnerton 3.5 years ago. And I think they're going through final commissioning now with HCIA, formerly OSHPOD, right? And trying to finish that off. One of the reasons we've delayed is we wanted to make sure they got that done first, so we're not interfering with operations. But meanwhile, we've been quietly and meticulously planning towards this intergenerational community.
Thank you for your kind of synopsis on what the Wellness Village is. I think you mentioned some pieces around individuals that have Medicare or Medi-Cal. When you say that, you know, what is the percentage? I mean, if it's a senior wellness village, what percentage do you see as like the Medicare, Medi-Cal community in this wellness village?
Yeah.
You did say, you know, you would follow our affordable housing ordinance, which is 10%. But I wanted to know, was it separate that you see, you know, some sort of like those that are very low income, Medi-Cal, Medi, like are you looking at serving that population, which is actually a lot of the community members that go to CEDN?
That's a great question, and for clarification, Mayor Manalo, is we're looking at each piece as a separate project. Our investors and everybody else, we're looking at separate projects, and each piece has its 10% below market rate requirement. And so we will adhere to that, and that's what our current pro formas show. The other thing I neglected to mention is that we are also within the housing, providing extended stay facilities for families seeking longer-term care. We think it's much more humane rather than getting a motel nearby, renting a car, or sleeping in a chair next to your loved one. To have something like that on site, we've been in discussions with Ronald McDonald Center, potentially put one here for kids, especially kids with cancer. So we're blending all this in, and the other thing is that we're underpinning all this with village amenities, wellness amenities. So it's essentially, you know, pulling each of the shared items like, you know, food service, like food courts and farm to table and therapy and exercise, as well as other socialization pieces out together. I used to work for the city of San Jose, and Santana Row was one of my projects I was overseeing. So we want to get that lively and that vitality back. I think the other thing we're in discussions with AHMC is their number one pinch point, like many hospitals across the state, is the attraction and retention of nurses. So we are in discussions with them to allocate up to 20% of the housing attainable housing towards the nurses. It's fascinating to me. Some of these nurses make actually an average $170,000 a year because they do so much overtime. Many are single mothers, so we will have childcare on site. And it's just dangerous after a long shift for them to drive an hour away or so. The other thing they express to us is in the evenings too. It's they think there's a safety concern because even though the parking lots are well lit, they are vast. There aren't many people out there, especially in the evening between shifts. So AHMC does like this idea of a village clipping onto the hospital, not impacting the hospital's operations, but rather enhancing it and giving it a better sustainable economic future. I think many of you know that this is the second time it had gone into bankruptcy when AHMC bought it. And we at AGI believe the two most valuable assets in any community are the schools and the hospitals or healthcare facilities.
I think one question I do have in regards to this is you talked about workforce housing just recently around the nurses. How are you going to, when you're allocating 20%, how are you able to do that in regards to kind of some of the pieces? I mean, you said you did a project in Santana Row, but this is very specified for our nurses, right? So how are you going to do that with kind of fair housing, et cetera? Like, it's a great idea, but I was wondering if you have thought through kind of those semantics.
Yeah, Mayor, my apologies. When I was talking about the ground level vitality, I was referring to Santana Row, not what the overall community is like. This is going to be positioned very, very differently. That's for like the folks down in Silicon Valley that have wanted a certain lifestyle, right? But this is very different. This is a very down-to-earth, on-the-ground wellness community. And what we've been speaking to AHMC and other hospital partners about is that they would essentially rent en bloc 20% at market rate plus maybe a block discount for those apartments for the nurses, potential residents, and also we're also looking at first responders.
What is your AGI Avante, right?
Yes, AGI Avant.
What is your track record in using our local labor in the Bay Area?
We worked with labor and labor unions before. We have very good relationships with them. In fact, one of our investors that we've been speaking to is the Carpenters Union's pension fund. So we do have very good relationships with labor. And depending on the size of the project and the nature of the project, we figure out what makes sense and at which parts of the project make sense for them. And we have a very harmonious relationship so far. We've never ever been sued by labor or anything.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Prayano and then Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else after? Okay.
Thank you. So
Yes.
question, I hear rental. So there's no parts of your project that there would be condos for people to purchase, or is it all going to be rental?
Yeah, currently, we are all rental, and because we typically don't like going to the suits with condos, and also a lot of our investors are institutional investors, and so they like the income generated by the properties and the long-term asset under management aspect.
One of the statements was that these projects would be a family. So the question is, what size are we talking? So we're looking at apartment buildings. So you already probably have an idea of what sizes, depending on a developer,
Yeah.
their concept of size might be different than what we would assume would be a size for a family.
Yeah, so we have looked very hard at a lot of various market reports, not just from one source. We do our own digging. We talk to a lot of folks. And this corner of Daly City There's a lot of young people, a lot of working population. Also, there are, in the adjacencies, there's a lot, as you know more than I, multi-generational households as well. So I think what we're trying to do is respect and give everybody their space. We do have plans from everything from studio units up to 2-bedroom units. But currently, we're not looking at any 3-bedroom units because you can kind of co-join those. We're also looking at modular construction methods so that we're able to shift an interior wall. It should, one type of apartment do better than another and be very responsive to the market and in that way. That's one of our strategies.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Thank you. Well, this is no reflection on you, because I know you've been in development with AHMC, but currently they spoke with you in August 2022, and while you were doing that, which was, you were doing the good thing, then 10th floor was shut down, COSIDE ER was shut down, all kinds of things were happening, and services that were promised to our residents in our community were not adhered to. So that is an issue for me because their actions proved over there, and I really feel bad for you because their actions there, they didn't follow through on their contract. So not to say anything they would with you, because you sound very credible, and I like, your ideas and that. And plus, who, with all respect to you and the nurse, why would someone want to live? I haven't heard of any developments where people live, have children or elders right next to hazardous medical waste. Would you have your child outside working, playing, or what have you, from all that back materials? And we know where they come from, because the neighbors that live around there is no parking, as you know, on the street areas to begin with. Where's the traffic study? Where is that going to be? I guess we don't get to see that as well once they already build, right? And that, I know, again, it's the 500, we're being held, not from you, sir, respectfully, we're being held hostage over 530 units here. And then something that could change for the communities, the Lolas and the Lolas that use our facilities, they actually walk there or see their doctors, or that emergency room, the cath lab. The cath lab is used also from Kaiser, and it's not working. The elevator's not working and has not worked for almost a year. I think it's a year. So people inside, workers, are having to take carts up and down, up and down, up and down with patients. And these are things that, again, are not respectful on you, but we have someone that's planning a wellness, and the AG files a lawsuit because they're not complying with that. How are they going to comply with any of this? And then this great developer who you've done some fantastic work and have a great background in your resume, and then they're going to build that. Can we trust them for that? And then for this nice gentleman here, I personally find it as a red flag, and I don't think the nurses would live right next to, they could, next to anything that's hazardous medical waste in that area, or seniors, or what have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have many questions, if I may. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for being here. I'm going to make a comment about you, Mr. Longhausen and Cynthia. Thank you all. First of all, I'd like to start off with Mr. Longhausen. So this is what you've been doing for the past few years. And, I just have to commend you, and you and Tatum and the staff, because I'm swimming up here and barely keeping above water. So that's a kudos to you. Cynthia, I'd like to make a comment about you. Thank you very much, because you made it much easier to understand. Not that Mr. Longhausen is not doing what he's supposed to be doing, but the way you explained it made it much easier for me to understand. And Mr. Nia, David Nia, thank you so much because the various ideas you had to address many people within the community from young to senior, that was very impressive to me. So it really shows not only your expertise, your experience, and the previous projects you've done before. It gives me a lot of information. Now, Mr. Longhausen, I'd like to thank you because you did send an email approximately about a month ago pertaining to this housing development, but we're down to a point where we have to stop kicking the can down the road and make a decision. However, I'm going to be frank with you, 100 and, how many pages this was a lot for me to digest, and it's still a lot, and I would like to have some more time to look at it. I find it strikingly surprising that with the agenda items tonight was this element, and then the letter from AHMC. I mean, okay, well, where are we going here? And we can see the passion here for Seton Hospital. So I would need some more time to digest that information. This is just my thought. So for Cynthia, I have a few questions I'd like to ask of you. Matter of fact, one of them has already been asked, but that was one. This was one question, and Mr. Longhausen, I think you can probably answer it as well. But I wrote it down at the beginning, and we started to get an answer to that question. But before I ask you that question, I'm going to ask Mr. Longhausen. We went off on a tangent on Seton Hospital. Was there any other developments that is possibly earmarked that's going to be changed? We stopped at Seton.
There was 1500 Southgate, which is at Cerro and Southgate.
Okay, and then it was Seton. And I think on page 1, I was going to question about Geneva. Is that one that's going to be rezoned as well? Geneva
Nothing
across
on
from the Cow
Geneva.
Palace?
No, that's not being rezoned.
Okay.
Those are all CMUs. Those parcels were rezoned in
Okay,
November.
but there's no other than what you've put up, and this
Not
is
for
where we
rezoning,
stopped.
no.
Is
no.
there any more after
We needed
this?
to change the general plan designation in a very minor way for a parcel on First Avenue. But
on First
rezonings,
Okay.
this parcel was the last one.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you got to cover your information, because it seemed like we.
Well, there actually is more to the presentation if you'd like to
Okay, well,
continue with
I think
it.
I think I better get these questions out before
Sure.
we start to go deeper into some of the other aspects. Ms. Cynthia was about to get up. Can anybody, and this question was asked, but I didn't get a firm answer. What if we do not meet our shortfall? This plan is from 2023 to 2031, with an estimated shortfall, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1681 units. What if we don't meet that? What happens? I think, Mr. Longhausen, you kind of alluded,
Sure.
state.
It's actually fairly simple, council member. The state of California will not certify our housing element.
No certification, okay. And if we don't certify our housing element, then you said we lose certain state funding.
We lose, there are regional
Monies.
agencies, yes.
Right.
Yes, that will, CCAG, for example, will
Right.
not allocate funds to the city of Daly City without an adopted housing element.
And Mr. Chu, who's been so quiet there, and I always harped on our infrastructure and roads. Is that part of state money that we could possibly lose?
Yes. Did you want to?
Yes, that is correct. There
That's-
are certain funding that we get for roads that is, requires us to have a certified housing element.
Gotcha. So is it SB 1 or SB 9? One of those.
We do have SB 1 money, we have Measure A money, there's various funding sources. Some of those, as I mentioned, do have a requirement to have a
Gotcha.
certified housing element.
Thank you very much. Going back to the question, if we don't meet the requirements, if we were to move forward in the process and have approved this plan, will there be a mechanism in place to provide us constant updates as the years progress? We are 300 units short. We are 200 units short.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Every year, the city's required to submit a general plan annual report, and we have brought that to the city council before, and we would do that.
Gotcha. I think San Francisco has to build 85,000 units. In Daly City, you folks have done a tremendous job in identifying vacant lots and et cetera. Where else can we build? Or will we have to re-identify more lots? Or, as you made mention, begin the rezoning process of certain lots so that we can try to, in other words, can we build anywhere else in Daly City that you know of?
We're running out of spaces. Yeah.
Okay. ADUs. How is Daly City on the area of ADUs in the sense of if somebody wants to put an ADU in their backyard, and do they have to obtain architectural drawings to submit to the planning division?
They need to submit for a building permit application, reviewed by planning, yes.
Reviewed by planning. So that's an additional cost for them.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, Hart Housing Endowment and Regional Trust has provided ADU plans ranging from, I think, 1 to 2 bedrooms, and they're going around, it was subsidized by a financial organization, and they were going to each city to get it approved. Has Daly City approved those diagrams?
We're in the process of working on pre-approved plans and creating a space on our website to distribute that information to the public.
Yes, because it's free. And so I think that would help. And, you know, I'm trying to help mitigate some of the issue with some homeowners who have the space and would like to put an ADU. Cynthia, I didn't forget you. I'm going down the list here. Thank you for the update. I believe the Ceremony project of 330 units has been entitled, but you've been in contact with the owner, and is the owner amenable?
Yes.
Good.
We've
All
had a
right.
conversation with his son, who we would assume communicates with him.
Okay. High density. I remember, especially on the project, somebody said something and really upset me was, we're not going to have any say. And I'm talking about the Geneva project when we're looking at the direction of the sun and the way the sun goes down and affecting some of the other areas there. And when I heard that term, we're not going to have a say, I'm just wondering if I'm going to be sanctioned if I vote no.
If you're speaking about 2321 Geneva Avenue, that was made a non-discretionary land use in November of 2023, the approval of that project. It was in the CMU zoning. So that's not part of, that wouldn't, nothing that happens tonight would change that.
Workforce housing. Correct me if I'm wrong. The concept is great, but we don't get any brownie points for workforce housing. Titled workforce housing. The way I understand workforce housing is based upon the chart you put up, and you show the various levels of income. Now, if you have staff or workers in Daly City who meet one of those levels, then they can perhaps be eligible to obtain housing if they meet those certain income requirements. That's what I consider that could be construed as workforce housing because they're staff.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Somewhat. The city has a affordable housing ordinance where it requires that a certain percentage of the units,
Right.
10% in a rental project, for example, meet one of those income targets. The state of California has what's called missing middle policies, and they're included in the housing element to try and allow us to develop smaller units within existing neighborhoods, which is really a realistic sort of approach in Daly City. For example, there's a policy about developing or adding units on corner lots that tend to be a little larger. The state's added that. So we'll be coming back to you with additional implementation measures. That isn't in this round of implementation measures because it's not needed to get the certification. But those are some of the things that sort of also target the workforce housing concept, the missing middle.
Thank you. I want to compliment you on your diagrams that you provided also, because there's been concern. We can up here say one thing, but if you can show us as being wrong, or full and complete transparency is the key, because a confused mind, as I've said this many times, will always say no. And so thank you for the update on, on the parking. I would not call you on it, but I would ask you questions. I generally try not to ask questions that I don't already have the answer. I appreciate that. Cynthia, I know you've been waiting to answer. No, don't get up. No, don't get up. What I was going to say, I had a lot of questions here, but Mr. Lunkhausen answered all of them. And maybe I was just going to call you up so I can hear you talk, because it helps me. In other words, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and you've done that, and you helped me to understand. So I really appreciate it very much. So I'll end and close on this. This is a lot of information to digest. We can continue to talk and, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And I think it really wouldn't be productive, but it's good to talk about it so we can take down these notes. And then when we start going through this, then we can ask, not to say none of the questions were appropriate, but there are certain other aspects. Everybody brings something to the table, and we learn from everyone. But this is a lot of information to digest, and quite truthfully, I'm not ready to make a decision on it tonight. So I thank you all for your presentation and providing the information that you've provided to us. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Sylvester, for your questions and comments. Are there any other questions at this point? I will ask this in regards to the timeline staff has. If we were to move this at our next council meeting to give folks some more time to read and digest the housing element, how does that impede on the timeline that you have kind of set forth so that we get certified or whatnot?
Essentially, it just reduces our wiggle room with the state of California by 2 weeks. I mean,
By 2 weeks.
yeah, it's really not much more complicated than that.
Okay.
We've got to submit. A bit of the issue is that the state is very specific, and we included the letter the state wrote us as an attachment to your staff report. They require that we submit the resolutions and ordinances. They want to see where your signature is on the ordinance that we rezoned these properties, and there's a second reading required for rezoning. So we're into the November meeting for that, and we sort of assume that state work kind of slows down or stops at the second half of December. So we're really in a tight time frame for that, and that there's it's no accident we brought this what we think was early for a very late housing element to you in October to allow for some time frames. But I hope I'm answering your question.
I'm looking at my
Yeah.
calendar right now. And then the other question I have is, how much money are we potentially losing from MTC and other state jurisdictions? What is that number?
I don't have an exact amount for you. It is in the millions.
In the millions? Can someone, I mean, that could be high, low.
I think for OBAG funding, it's somewhere about 1.3 million. That's for the street maintenance and repair type of work. Then we also have PLHA money, which is permanent local housing funds, and I believe that's around $1 million. So we're looking at 2.3 million.
Okay, thank you. And then, so basically that's the carrot and the stick. I understand that these dollars are attached to the approval of this document. Is there a hard deadline where they will say, hey, you know, you haven't had an approved housing element, those dollars are now taken away? I just want to understand, because in the decision-making process this evening, really want to kind of factor those in as well.
I believe CCAG is submitting a letter to MTC to request an extension on the OBAG funds. We don't know if that will be granted. If it is not granted, the hard date is December 31.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think at this point, hearing from my colleagues on the dais today, I would ask this. You know, we have staff in front of us. Is it helpful for folks to? Are you almost done with your presentation? You have much more.
Well, there was
I
a
just
little
want to
more,
make
yeah.
use of our time, but also if it's going to help my colleagues kind of go through the information, and we don't, you know, we're going to meet in 2 weeks, then I'm trying to gauge. But if also this takes an opportunity for folks to kind of read through this again, you know, you come back and present. I don't want to have to also belabor this evening. Therefore, make a motion, and I would have to ask Rose in this regard, since it is a hearing, if we can just, continue this hearing to our next meeting, this particular item.
Yes, we would continue it to a date certain, and we would have to have a motion to continue it. You don't have to have the public hearing if we are going to continue it.
Okay, and so that would be not November 11, because that is Veterans Day.
It's October 28th.
October 28th.
October.
October
October.
28th, that's right.
October 28th.
Okay, so I make a motion to move this item, to continue this hearing to October 28th.
I second.
Okay, I have a second from Vice Mayor. May we have a roll call, please?
Ms. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Dr. Rod?
Aye.
Ms. Perano?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Can we get a copy of your slide presentation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Glenn Sylvester, aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye. Thank you very much to staff, the consultants. Thank you for also coming here, AGI and everyone that presented. Really appreciate your time this evening. We'll see each other in 2 weeks. Thank you. Moving on to our next item on our agenda. It is item number 10. Designate voting delegate and alternate for League of California Cities General Assembly.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. The League of California Cities Annual Conference and Expo is scheduled for October 16 through 18, 2024 in Long Beach. Each year at this conference, the League membership considers and takes action on resolutions that establish Cal Cities policy. In order to vote at the General Assembly on October 18, 2024, the City Council must designate a voting delegate. The City Council may also appoint up to 2 alternate voting delegates, one of whom may vote in the event that the designated voting delegate is unable to serve that role. It is recommended that the Council select and designate a voting delegate and up to 2 alternates to participate in the League of California Cities General Assembly on October 18th.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Leilani. I think it would be helpful to know who would be in attendance and who's signed up for.
We have 3 members registered, Mayor Manalo, Councilmember Sylvester, and Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Thank you. I think what would be helpful is understanding who will be present from my colleagues until the end of the conference.
I believe all three are registered for the entire conference.
Okay. Because voting, I believe, happens at about general session is at 10:30 or so. Is that
I
correct?
believe late morning on Friday.
On Friday.
Yes.
Okay. All right. At this point, do we have a motion for designating a voting delegate for League of California Cities?
I'd like to nominate Mayor Manalo.
I second.
Okay, I have a first and second. And this is for alternates as well? Are you doing through, is this for alternates as well?
So it would be a voting delegate and then up to 2 alternates.
Okay, may we have roll call, please?
Ms. DiGiovanni,
Aye.
Dr. Rod,
Aye.
Ms. Perano,
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester,
Glenn Sylvester, aye.
Ms. Manalo.
Aye, thank you very much. For the alternates, I move to nominate Council Member Glenn Sylvester and Council Member Pam DiGiovanni.
Second.
Okay, may we have roll call, please?
If I may, for discussion, I will have to decline because my schedule will not permit it. And as of today, I have not received any resolutions to read up on the resolutions that we will be voting upon. So I would respectfully decline to be an alternate at this time.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll do a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that. I'll do a friendly amendment and nominate Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Yeah, and I'll be checking on my flight. I think hopefully it doesn't leave because I'll know tomorrow. But go ahead and put me down as an alternate until I know otherwise.
Just for the record and for my colleagues, I plan to stay until the
I know.
General Assembly. In case anything happens to me or I get ill, then the alternate
That's
would be
fine.
useful.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Wonderful. So at this point, we have a motion at the table. We have a second. We have a roll call, please.
Ms. DiGiovanni,
Aye.
Dr. Rod,
Aye.
Ms. Perano,
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester,
Glenn Sylvester, aye.
Ms. Manalo.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to council committees, item number 11, council committees. Are there any reports from my colleagues with council committee?
I do, Mayor.
Okay, please, Vice Mayor.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Sylvester.
All right. I attended the September 26th Peninsula Clean Energy meeting. Very fruitful meeting. We talked about a strategic framework adoption and talking about 2025 for our meeting in December 19. There's also talks and conversations about future office space and facilities, about expanding our space because we're changing our orientations of meetings from remote to in person. And so we'll see what will happen in about a year. Conversations about maybe moving Peninsula Clean Energy to another location, but we'll find out more in that December 19th meeting. Also, as of July 31st, 2024, PCE customers have saved more than 27 million in comparison to 2023 to 24.5 million. And so I guess the forecasting is that by the end of this fiscal year, they're looking at a 40 million savings. So there's a lot of things that are happening in terms of our annual savings. There was also a summary of the legislation and advocacy and lobbying from PCE. So they talked about what are potential changes in the Assembly, state and Senate offices that are coming up, and then what are other CCA's policies regarding clean energy. We also talked about this other conversation about nuclear energy, and we had a conversation back in like 2022 about Diablo Valley nuclear plant and its risks. But what has happened is that the state has this, where the state will putting them back online in 2025, and there were all these different concerns about Diablo Valley or the Diablo Canyon concerns. So about earthquake risks because it goes onto fault lines, tsunami risks because of like things like Chernobyl, Fukushima, long-term storage concerns. But there are also different conversations about nuclear energy and the role of it being carbon-free, so and GHG-free. So other nuclear plants, it's seen as a very valuable asset in terms of providing carbon-free energy. But for this specific site, because of where it's located, it has its specific critiques and context for that. And so one of the steps for this is it's almost kind of like our last issue about like our own advocacy versus regional versus state. And since the state already approved it, we're going to be providing, or this type of energy will probably, or not probably, will be online in the future. So there was this conversation around allocation and attributes. So there was this, so what we voted on was this idea of allocation. So we just wanted to go and get in front of this issue and this idea that it's not procurement, but it's a decision whether to accept or reject carbon-free attributes from Diablo Canyon nuclear allocation between 2025 and 2030. And then they did like a whole fiscal report on it. If we don't take it, oh shit, I don't even have it. If we don't take it, we're losing out on or carbon-free energy. And so the PCE actually voted on it to have Diablo Canyon as a allocation. So next steps is at our future meeting, we'll notify the PG&E, CPUC, and sign an agreement in our December meeting. So, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from my other colleagues who are also locally elected officials that have been working in energy. So there are some of my colleagues that have worked in plants where it was like fossil fuel versus nuclear, and nuclear energy is far less harmful and in terms of carbon energy. And I didn't really know that. It just, this specific site has its risks because of it being on a fault line and being on the coast. But it's kind of like a rock and a hard place because of the state already voted that it'll be online and it's coming. So we're gonna have to just, we're gonna be using it anyway. So it's one of those hard decisions that we had to make, and PC voted to have this allocated to us. So yeah, that's my report for Peninsula Clean Energy.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor, for your work on PCE.
Yeah.
I think it's so important that we have you there. Maybe you could do like a mini workshop or whatnot in your professor slash PCE board member, because I'm sure we'll learn a lot, and a lot of the issues and combating kind of what we need to do for the climate resiliency we all need to look at is in front of us. And how kind of all of the interchanging legislation from the state to our city is kind of all happening, right? So thank you for your service on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any other council member Sylvester?
Thank you. Mosquito Vector Control District, short report, nothing new. West Nile virus is in check, and other than that, things are going well. I just wanted to let you know that I serve on the Finance Committee of the Department of Emergency Management, to which I had reported the last time around what was going on. Well, however, Dr. Sharuti noticed that our JPA agreement with all 21 cities in San Mateo County, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 13 years old. And with some recent changes in the JPA, to which the Finance Committee discussed, it was brought before the entire board and it was approved. However, the final approval rests with the city councils of every city in San Mateo County. And part of the change in the JPA, we used to get a lot of funding from the Sheriff's Department. I think that has been cut tremendously. Or I don't know if the Sheriff's Department is still part of the Department of Emergency Management, but now we have to, we have to buy our own vehicles, where we used to get hand-me-downs from leftover Sheriff's Department equipment. So that's all fine and dandy, but I'd like to report to you, we approved it, but we didn't seek the stakeholders' input on the Department of Emergency Management. Who would I mean by stakeholders? The police chiefs of every city. We didn't ask them, what do you think? So it's going to be slightly delayed. I'll keep you posted on that. And I've informed our city manager, and we're trying to get all the chiefs together and to discuss this. So look for that to happen later on in the future. But just to let you know, there's a slight delay on the new JPA agreement. Daly City pays its fair share into getting emergency services, and so does every other city. And believe me, I've questioned it to make sure that we have equity. Okay? So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Sylvester, and I appreciate you as well for your service on those regional committees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to be moving on to our next agenda item, which is our city council reports. I will share that for city council reports, there was an event with the Peninsula Division on climate change, on sea level rise and climate action, with Assembly Member Pappin and other leaders in our community. I want to acknowledge that it was wonderful to see Councilmember Proaño and her granddaughter, one of the facilitators of questions for the panel. So that was wonderful to see young people stepping up, really taking action towards climate change, and was able to join the employee appreciation event. That was wonderfully well done from HR. I think, it was great to see all of the milestones in the Daly City family in regards to, all of the anniversaries working and serving the city of Daly City. And I also joined the Immigration Resource Night at Jefferson Union High School's district's new building in their district office. It was a culmination of all of the schools around the area, district, so Jefferson Union High School District, It was also Jefferson Elementary School District, the Bayshore School District, Panorama School, and it was really wonderful to see all the resources for our immigrant community. I was also able to join the San Mateo homelessness briefing on the state of homelessness in San Mateo County with the county manager and also the staff with other elected officials getting an update with that. Also, there was a senior youth program, intergenerational program with self-help for the elderly with over 90 participants, really over a 3-month period, building community with the youth and the older adults. Happy 35th years to the Filipino Bayanihan Resource Center. Also, congratulations to Crossroads Christian Center for their 36th anniversary. And Joint Supervisor David Canepa, who's currently the Vice President of San Mateo County, he had an event called Light to Loneliness, and it was really around being able to highlight the work that was being done in different cities to combat loneliness. He led with having the county be the first in the nation to deem a public health crisis with loneliness. We followed as the city of Daly City shortly after as the first city in the nation, and really talking about our work with our older adults and seniors that we do with our recreation department, and also building so many events in our community. And I'll just share this. It was Leilani that mentioned a constituent that called in regards to one of our events. And they said, oh, this event is happening. I don't know which event particularly, but she said, oh, am I able to come? Because if you can explain, yeah.
We received a call from a resident, and she was interested in open house and asked if she's lonely, is she able to come to the event? And we told her absolutely, we would welcome her here. So that was very nice for her to see the materials in our newsletters that our events we are having really to combat loneliness.
Thank you so much. And that was just one story, but, really being able to let our community members know that they're not alone and we are here. And that also myself and ECD, coordinator or was able to join Live in the Bay to highlight our Top of the Hill Festival. And so we were able to share kind of, how we're going to have our event on October 19 with the community. It was also Montero Credit Union's grand reopening, which was formerly San Mateo Credit Union, but that they're just rebranding. And so it's good to support a business right there in Westlake. And then I want to say thank you so much to Kasayahan, all the recreation staff, for all the work that you did for the 10-year anniversary that happened at March Banks Park. It was wonderfully done. I know each and every one of you did a lot of work there. I also joined the 80th anniversary of Leyte Landing, and that just happened, and there was a commemoration in Presidio, San Francisco, to honor that. Also, there was an event called Yes in My Backyard, the YIMBY celebration, with many regional housing advocates from local elected to state legislators. The theme was a prom. And so they had actually deemed a prom king and a prom queen. And so Senator Scott Wiener was prom king. And Mayor London Breed was prom queen in regards to pushing for more housing in the community. Lastly, with the Daly City Open House, I just want to say thank you to your leadership, Tom, and also just all the department heads that came together, from the firefighters to the police to recreation, library, Department of Water and Wastewater. And I think everyone just coming together, human resources, to have that human touch, to give people the opportunity to ask their questions, especially as residents. And really, the premise of that is that this is the people's city hall. And it always was very bewildering to me when people would say, this is my first time in City Hall, and living in the community for a long time. And so really the Daly City open house was for our residents, but really without the hard work of our staff, it couldn't have happened. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that came. We know it was a Friday evening, but there was a resident that did say she lived here for 43 years. And she goes, this is the first time she's been here. And she was someone that goes to the Lincoln Community Center. So I appreciate all the staff for all their work in that respect. And I also wanted to say that I had joined community members to honor one of our, unfortunately, one of our community members that had lost his life tragically. Some of the community members at Fitness 19 came together and did a moment of silence. And so I joined them to have a moment of silence to honor. And in the evening, this evening, I will also adjourn in honor and memory of Rolando Ayanga. But that was, where community members got together and just wanted to pay respect at Fitness 19 in that regard. And with that, are there any other city council reports from my colleagues?
I just have a couple. Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
I will add the opportunity to attend the Faith in Action Home is Sacred event on October 10th at Westmore High School. It was greatly attended by different Faith in Action members up and down the state, as far as San Francisco to folks in Central California, but primarily most of the people that came were from the peninsula and San Francisco. I was also joined with colleagues from different jurisdictions, Redwood City, South San Francisco, City of San Francisco County, and also was joined by JESD Board of Trustee Kalima Saludin. And we listened to different testimonials, talked about some of their platform, Faith in Action, talked about more affordable housing, rent control, and anti-harassment. There was one woman that talked about her being harassed by her landlord over her son being mixed race, who's half Latino and half Black. When the landlord found out that he was Black, the tenant was physically assaulted. Her son was almost assaulted, and we want to start talking about how these conversations can be introduced on the dais, but to also work with our staff in terms of maybe working out an ordinance about anti-harassment. I also was able to talk to some other folks that were part of Faith in Action, and unlivable situations where people have been utilizing some properties where they would makeshift other rooms to be rented out, and where there's been presence of cockroaches and rats. And when there have been people that were representatives to look at these properties, they would ask the landlord would ask the tenants to leave, where they would clean everything up, and then when the person would come and look over the place, once they would leave, then they would put up all the different dividers and everything. So these are things that I've been in conversation with the leaders in Faith in Action, especially here locally, And also, I just want to thank all the folks in Park and Rec. I know this has been a lot of festivals that have been happening, but it's much needed, and I'm so grateful and appreciative for all the staff and Denise. And I'm also talking about the Bayshore Community Block Party that happened this past weekend, and I've seen a couple of my colleagues in attendance, and that was a beautiful thing to enjoy. Had a smash burger with our with Tom over here, and it was a great. It felt like a family reunion. Like I haven't seen a lot of these folks in a minute, and it was cool to see a lot of the folks I haven't seen in a long time at this event. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I did forget that one. That was just past Saturday, the Bayshore Community Block Party, which I want to thank each and every one of you for, voting on partnering with Bayshore, which was a no-brainer in co-sponsoring the event being held at the community center. But it was really great, very family. Every level had something to do, and it was well attended and provided resources, but also fun for the community. And that they had a DJ in every level or whatnot. Yeah. And so that was really wonderful. I think I forgot to mention those that are watching. Please join us next Saturday at the Top of the Hill Festival, October 19th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So hopefully we'll see you there.
I'll just make it real quick. Just piggybacking on a few of the events that were already mentioned, and I just want to say is every time I go to an event, I'm just so impressed with our recreation.
Yes.
Bayshore was tons of fun. Marchbanks Park turned into I kept saying, it was so hot that day, I thought it's like what Dorothy said, we're not in Kansas anymore. I definitely did not feel like we were in Daly City. But there were so many wonderful booths, informational booths. And so I want to give kudos to you, and I know everyone else did. Attending the homelessness workshop was eye-opening as well. And in hearing what San Mateo County does above and beyond and the opportunities to help within our community. I know I'm missing other things, but I will say the highlight, definitely the latest and the greatest was, our last two events actually last three, if we could talk. Thank you again, Recreation. And I know other departments also participated. Looking forward to Top of the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Prano.
Thank you.
Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Yeah, rather than repeat everybody else, we all, we can't say enough about you, Denise. I'm sorry. And she was working on her birthday at Casayan in the heat, was there all morning, but such a trooper you are. We are so grateful. And I say Shayla and everybody in the heat, Joshua's, everyone, right? So we never give up here, right? And even Mr. Chu and then all the employee appreciation. I mean, there's so many things that you guys did all the way from the Bayshore. People really need to know how great they are. The young people that you hire, I mean, you know how to get them going. There's only one Denise, one Shayla, and they really get going. So all the departments participated, and kudos to the city staff and Recreation and Mr. Chu and Joshua, and our city manager had his staff there as well, and everyone. And finance, they were there as well, right? I was like, wow, finance, they were giving out calculators. I thought that was pretty cool. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other city council reports?
Calculators.
Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on to staff reports.
Through the chair?
Yes.
I would just like to piggyback on what the mayor said earlier. At Top of the Hill Festival, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. There'll be vendors, businesses, tables and booths, information tables from community groups and city departments. There'll be performances, car show, kid zone, music, food, The weather is forecasted to be a Daly City like 72 degrees, so we're hoping that that holds true, and we're hoping that the council, the staff, and the public are able to come out and join us. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, City Manager Piccolotti. I know that the whole team here in Daly City has been working diligently to prepare for that. I want to say thank you. I've seen them at top of the hill, power washing already, preparing, letting people know, businesses, and so I know everyone is having wonderful teamwork towards this inaugural event. That's Daly City's festival. So thank you so much. We're now moving on to the end of our agenda this evening. And I'm going to pass it on to my colleague as we move into a memoriam of our community. And so I'll pass it on to Council Member Teresa Praano.
Before I talk about my dad, I'd like to mention, if you guys would indulge me, Adrienne Tissier. We all know who she is. Her brother died. She was our mayor. She was San Mateo County Supervisor. And her brother, Jerry, he's her older brother, and he grew up in San Francisco and then Daly City, and he attended Westmore High School, played baseball there, and he was a classmate of Don Horsley. We're guesstimating graduating, we believe, 1964 from Westmore High School. He passed, again, his name is Jerry Tissier, and he passed away on October 5th in Glendale, Arizona. So I'd like to just mention that. So my dad had colon cancer, and I think it's important. We discussed having checkups, and I think it's so important to catch. This is one that if you catch it early on, you're able, hopefully, to have something done. And I'm just going to read, it's just a short obituary, but I wanted to say before anything is, City of Daly City and my colleagues here, the people of Daly City, friends, family, I've never received so much outpouring of love and support. The police department, fire department, I mean, there's no words. My family and I are so grateful. So my dad is Rafael Gomez Lopez, and he passed away peacefully at the age of 89. My dad was the kind of guy that if he didn't get cancer, he would be getting up in the morning and going to work, because that's what my dad knew. He leaves behind my mom, Maria, and my brother, Charlie, my sister, Peggy Sue Lopez Mendoza, my brother, Donnie, myself, my sister, Rebecca, my sister, Anna, and my brother, Ralph. 25 grandchildren. I always lose one. Sometimes I say 24, but there's 25 grown grandchildren and 44 and a half great-grandchildren. We're waiting 2 more months for another great-grandchild. My dad was born in the state of Jalisco, Mexico. He was one of 10 children to Dionisio and Maria Concepcion Lopez. My dad was a loving and faithful son and brother. My dad he came to the United States when he was 15. And before he came to Daly City, he worked in the fields in Davenport. and he met my mom there and in 1955, and they came to Daly City in 1957. My dad worked for Sunset Scavenger, which is Recology, and he worked also South San Francisco Scavengers. My dad also worked part-time at the Juniper Serra landfill in Coma for a few years. And he worked with Sunset Scavenger to set up a recovery station, West Bay Salvage, and that was in San Francisco. And then they had a partnership and recycling, so it's metal recycling. My dad worked all the time, and was something I mentioned in the when we talked amongst ourselves. My dad, I always say this: whenever I sweep, I think of my dad. Because I was little and my dad said, "Oh, no, that's not how you sweep. You have to sweep this way." And whenever I pick up a broom and I sweep, I think of him. My dad gave us the strongest work ethics. It didn't matter. You got the job done and you kept going. And that was something, and the love of family. My dad, my mom, both of them helped so many people because my dad was the first one to come here. And he helped so many people. It was amazing. And they would say, I'll sing at a funeral and somebody will come up and say, we didn't speak English, we didn't know where to go, we didn't know what to do, and your parents helped us, and that's the legacy. So I think a lot of it I inherited is helping people in the community. I was blessed to be able to be there the last few days. And then that's when you realize that, nothing really matters. You're there and you're holding their hand. And it's about family, and it's about love, it's about community, it's about helping people. And I just wanted to thank you for this time to talk about my dad, and to thank every single person that came and gave comfort, and I'll never forget it. And I wanted to thank you, Chief Tom, all of you who came. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any other adjourn in memory from my colleagues? If not, I have an adjourn in memory. Before I read this, I want to send my deepest condolences to the Younger family and to Teresa. I know her from community work in San Francisco and South of Market with affordable housing. And so when I got the news, it was definitely very hard to hear. And I know that family is here today with us this evening, and know that the community is with you. And we want to honor your father this evening. And so, in memory of your father, Rolando Yanga, this is what is from the family and the children. Our family is extremely grateful for the support from the community. Rolando was such a loved community member and took so much care of all age groups, from being there as a support with young ones at the gym, and took care of the elderly, and maintained any of the maintenance needs at a senior care facility. He will be dearly missed. As it is Filipino American History Month, he is a reason why Filipino American history continues, from being a first-generation immigrant from Pampanga. Through the legacy of him, his children lives on. And with that, may we all have a moment of silence.